Right, I think we're live. Morning, everybody. This is Johnny Mann speaking. I'm Chief Executive of IDM. IDM is an executive education, business education institution that works across Africa and across EMEA. My role right now is just to give you a quick introduction to the sequence of events that are taking place this morning before I hand over to Michael Lee for the first content event, which is looking at the 4 C's of the 4IR. So today, I think we've got about 50 people online, 50 or 60, from across the region. And the purpose of today is to really look at the human skills that underpin the 4th Industrial Revolution. So as you're all aware, the government of South Africa, the government of UK, governments across the world are focusing strongly on the technical skills that people need to learn for the 4th Industrial Revolution. People are talking about AI, robotics, big data, all sorts of things. But the big gap is the human skills that people need to really flourish in the 4th Industrial Revolution. The creativity skills, the adaptability skills, your speed of learning. And that's what today's about, really. We're going to run through a series of keynotes, which you should be able to see on your screen. In a few moments, I'll hand over to Michael Lee, and then after that, you'll hear from Rapalang, Sankoba Vuba, Emma Kay, and so on. So a range of subject matter experts. And overall, we'll be looking at what are the human skills that you really have to develop in order to flourish and in order for your careers to flourish. So we want to keep this as interactive as possible. There'll be opportunities for you to ask questions. There will be opportunities to chat. And I want to keep it as interactive as we can. We need to hear from you as much as you need to hear from us. And I think you need to hear from each other as well. So don't hold back about popping up ideas, popping up questions, and we'll manage them as best we can as we go forward. So as you can see, I've got a few minutes to give this intro. Then we're going to have a 15-minute keynote followed by another 15-minute keynote rolling quite through from both Michael and Rapalang. I'm sure they'll both ask you for questions and ideas. After that, we'll go through to Sankoba Vuba, who's going to talk to us a little bit about a 4IR strategy from a South Africa point of view. And then Emma Kay is going to talk to us about the future is human. You're bringing community into the conversation as far as digital equality is concerned. Then after that, for about half an hour, we're going to have a very interactive session run by Michael Lee. And we really need to hear from you all there. Hear your perspectives of what we've been looking at so far. Ideas, thoughts, questions, suggestions. And then we're going to have a 15-minute comfort break. And then after that, I hope you'll all come back and we'll be looking at making our IR skills a reality in the world of today. And Karabo Malato is going to take us through that. I've got a brief session towards the end where we're going to look at digital leapfrog. That's how do you accelerate your own learning? So the difficulty here is that the pace of learning is accelerating, as you know. The pace of job change is accelerating, as you know. But the pace with which you can develop your skills to keep track of that is absolutely key. And what we're looking at is how you can leapfrog different skill sets to keep pace with the changing environment. After that, Beth is going to take us through some community engagement, which is going to be a facilitated conversation. And then last, towards the end, we're going to hear from Beth Arenze. Sorry, Beth, I hope I've got your name correctly pronounced, about human capacity innovation and the Human Innovation Project itself, before Michael then closes us out. So it's quite packed. There's quite a lot to do. There's going to be a lot of content. Hopefully there's going to be a lot of engagement, but this will be successful if you engage with us. So that's it from my side. We're ahead of time already. That's the good news. So I'm going to hand across to Michael, if I may, for the 4 C's of the 4IR. Michael.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks. I'm gonna ask that we actually people are still coming in, right? So what I want to do is first start by giving a file to everybody, which is the schedule. I'm going to load that up now, so you can receive.
Just bear with us, everyone. Michael may have a slight technical issue here.
Sorry. I'm going to load that schedule up now. I know I've repeated myself a couple of times. We're having some reports. People are having a lot of trouble these days, the last few days, because the cables, it's interesting timing. We've had the situation with coronavirus and everybody going home and, having to work from home. So there's a huge amount of traffic online. At the same time, the C cables have been damaged. So I know some people are having a lot of trouble getting a clear connection. I'd like to just take a moment while we wait for a few more people to come in. Could we get some people on the chat just to let us know, how is your connection going? Anybody? Is anybody able to give us some chat on how your connection is going? Just send a message on the chat. Okay, so another thing that'll be great is just to let yourself be known that you're here. Just say hi to everybody on the chat. Looks like we're getting good connections, and that's fantastic. That's a good start. So basically, most people are getting 100% connection, and a couple people are having some problems. So bear with us. A lot of questions coming in about, is the event being recorded? It is supposed to be being recorded. Webinar Jam, the platform we're using, automatically records the webinar, but if anybody is able to record it on your side, it might turn out to be worthwhile. But it should be being recorded automatically by Webinar Jam. And we will be making that recording available to you to be able to share with others. But the big difference is, of course, this morning we are going to be interacting with you directly, and being able to have you be able to bring in your own. Oh, look at this, Brian Matamore from Stamford, Connecticut. Anybody else from outside of South Africa? It's exciting to have people from all around. So I'm going to stick with the schedule. I'm going to start my presentation in 2 minutes. From now, from 10 past, we'll be starting my presentation. But what I want to do now is just let you guys, if you haven't typed into the box who you are and what you're doing, please feel free to do that. We're going to be looking for a couple of people to join us in the community interaction as well. And I know we haven't actually shared what's going to happen, but it would be great if you let us know when you might want to be part of that. So go ahead and let us know on those things there. And I'm going to just join you back in 1 minute to talk about what my presentation is about, which is about looking at what are the 4 C's that we are talking about. We talked about 4IR. What is today all about, in fact, right? Got to leave you guys to talk to each other on the typing for 1 minute, and then I'm coming back. Don't go away. Okay, looks like a lot of people are still coming in. I'd like to hear from people also. You see Brianna is here, Barefoot Facilitator. We see KK Diaz is here. I don't know what his official title is, but he's doing some amazing stuff. We've got some really great people. Guga Sema from the MICT CETA, Greg Sarandos, guy also from America like me originally, but South African now. In fact, most of you, in case you don't know me, just to point out to you that I'm not originally from here online. I actually live in Randburg in Johannesburg. I've been in South Africa for a long time, and I'm an African American, as you might not have known. So, as I'm trying to basically get my project to load, it's taking a little longer than I'd like. I'm just looking for any more comments. Oh, KK thought I was from Soweto, which is not correct. I'm actually from Randburg, as we know. I'm going to actually just give you the original presentation that I was originally going to give you, because it's already here. So, what I want to talk about when we talk about what we mean by 4IR, right? We're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and we want to hear basically from you as this comes. If you have any questions, any thoughts you want to share, please type into the comment box. So basically, when we talk about fourth industrial revolution, we're talking about a phenomenon that nobody really seems to have the same idea what it is. We all know that there have been four, because we keep calling it the fourth industrial revolution. And, you know, we all know that the first one was about, originally the industrial revolution, about steam, mechanization, being able to actually have machines that moved us, right? We know that the second was around electricity, the third was around computing. And finally, the last one, today, we're all kind of trying to still figure out what it is, but somehow we've all been thrown into it in the last couple of weeks with this worldwide situation. So the question is that we want to address in this talk is really, what are we doing when we're dealing with the fourth industrial revolution? And secondly, what is the way that we can attack it and deal with it most simply in terms of, you know, human skills? So the first industrial revolution was about steam power and mechanization, but I like to look at how it really impacted human beings' relationship to things, right? If we look at how is our relationship impacted by 4IR, we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. But we see that in the first industrial revolution, we were dealing with the idea of space, right? Humans suddenly could travel far distances in a very short time. Not right away. The first train went about 7 miles an hour, which is about how fast the average person can walk at speed. So the original trains could carry a lot more than people could carry, but they couldn't really go any faster. But it didn't take long before steam power made things move faster, and it consolidated things into factories that were centralized, and it made people have to move their entire life. So the way humans related to space changed completely, right? And the second thing that it affected was our relationship to capital. So our relationship to capital was completely shifted, because suddenly capital was the power in the world. Before, it had been, having a lot of money didn't necessarily give you a lot of power outside of a small group. But now suddenly, because of mechanization, capital became much more powerful. In the second industrial revolution, which was an electrical revolution, right, the electricization of the world, we got into how time got changed. People related to time differently. We were able to work around the clock. Suddenly, nighttime changed from a time when work was very difficult to a time when work was not difficult at all. It also implied a change in our political systems around democracy. Suddenly, the democratization of a lot more parts of society was possible because of what electricity made possible. Communication systems and transport systems became far more able to be democratic. Jonathan has a question. He says, the first industrial revolution changed our relationship with distance, which in fact is exactly what I'm saying. That really the first industrial revolution changed the way we dealt with how space mattered to us. It was a much easier thing to travel after steam power entered the picture. Now, Jonathan's also asked, how did the first and second revolution change our relationship with information? And the answer is, it didn't really. That is what happened in the third industrial revolution, right? So the third industrial revolution was, as we know, an information revolution, something that started already in the late 1950s, but really got into motion in the 70s when people were starting to talk about futurism and how the future was going to be completely different for the first time. It wasn't just a general dream, it was actually the way that people foresaw how the future would be. And that all came as part of the information revolution. Bernard's adding that 1IR shortened the impact of events, and I'm not sure what that means. Oh, on the world. Right, impact of events was definitely made more powerful by the fact that we could mechanize and replicate, right? It was made even more powerful by the fact that we could then, in the second revolution, use electricity. In the third revolution, of course, it was made more powerful by things that have led to things like social media, right? And so the information revolution changed the way we communicate completely. And we all know that. It's really obvious, right? We changed how we talk to each other. This event right now is not a 4IR event per se. It's really just a 3IR event happening in a 4IR space. You know, the fact that we're all getting online and using Webinar Jam, or we talk on Zoom and have meetings that we've all come home now and working from home, is all a late 3IR situation, right? It's not really a 4IR situation. 4IR is a different situation. Information is cheap, right? Today, information is not a valuable commodity the way it was 50 years ago. You and I will get into an argument sitting at a table, and we're sitting at the table having an argument. We can solve that argument before we take another bite of food. You know, I'm sure you've all had that experience. We get an argument about something that's not really, you know, a big deal, and it's over. But that argument could have gone on for weeks. If we just argued about who was the, you know, Academy Award winner for Best Actor in 1973, and you said it's one person, I say it's Jack Nicholson, and you say it's Henry Fonda, and you know, we could argue about that forever. We'd have to get off the dinner, we'd have to get up in the morning, and we would have to basically deal with how, you know, do we get the answer to that? We'd have to call up the Academy, we'd have to get on the phone with somebody there, get the answer, and then you'd have to believe that I was telling you the truth, or you'd have to be in the same phone call. Right now, information is cheap. It's simple. We don't have to go to university to have it, and most information is easily accessible to everybody. And yeah, as Rahana, that's a great question. You know, how many people are left behind in these revolutions? How many people are, you know, actually impacted by them? It's a very good question, and something we'll deal with later in this thing today, in this event today. But what's important at first to realize is simply that we do have the access to information if we can get it to people. And knowledge is now the thing that matters. Knowledge meaning, how do we apply information, right? And because of that, what has changed politically for us is our relationship to our community. You may have noticed that social media makes it a lot easier to have communities that transcend your house or your neighborhood or your work environment. Right. Even today, this is a community that has assembled here. There's around several dozen people on this call, right, on this webinar, and some of us may have better connections than others, and other people may not be here today because they don't have a connection. But the community that begins to be developed in this conversation right now is something that could never have been done a few years ago. And therefore, community is becoming the place we trust information, because we know that on the internet we can get lots of information. But that information is not necessarily correct, right? That information is not necessarily stuff that we can actually believe. We don't know if Breitbart says something, then some people say it's wrong. If the New York Times says something, then others say it's wrong. If the ANC says something, people in the DA say it's wrong. You know, and if people in the DA say something, then the EFF might say it's wrong. So how do we know who to trust? How do we solve the trust issue? It's very simple. It's community. There's names of people going up the side of this list right now that you personally know, and you personally trust them because you know them. And the fact that they're on this webinar gives you already an implicit feeling of trust for that person that you might not even yet know. But because they're part of a group of us who are gathering for this event, you already trust them more. I guarantee you that's true. Isn't that true? I mean, I'd like to hear from people. Do you feel like people on this call that you don't necessarily know, you already feel a little bit warmer and more trusting of what they might bring to you because they're on this webinar with people that you do trust? And so what we need to look at in 4IR is, what are the skills that matter in terms of knowledge and community, right? And no longer does it matter about how much information we can gather. What matters is how can we put it together. So all of this stuff that we normally deal with in terms of 4IR, big data, AI, Internet of Things, augmented or virtual reality, different kinds of manufacturing, cloud computing, the 3D printing, all of these things that are happening inside of a system of human beings. And as much as we can learn coding, and as much as we can deal with, learning specifics around any of these things and how to manage them, these should be all put in the context of how do we as human beings engage them. And as so many people are already saying on the comments right now, how do we make sure that everyone can engage with the fourth industrial revolution when they can't even engage with the third? And some people struggle to even engage with the second. And in South Africa, we know that even the electricity revolution is sometimes not working out, even for people that do have access. So how do we bring all of this together, right? So very quickly, I want to just go through the way that the future of jobs for the World Economic Forum 5 years ago said it was that these were the 10 skills we needed. These are the 10 skills that the world would need in order to cope with what jobs demand today. Notice none of them are technical skills, right? None of them are skills that are about coding or any of that. They're all skills about ways that human beings think. Now you'll notice if you look at a little bit simplification of this, that 5 of these 10 skills are actually creativity skills, creative thinking skills. So the creative process itself covers all of the skills. Problem solving is the whole creative process. That's the number 1 skill. Number 2 skill, critical thinking. That basically comes in at the moments of incubating thoughts, and after ideation, the moment of marinating thoughts, thinking them through, right? Creativity, I think what they mean is the moment of conception, ideation. How do we actually deal with what we think of when we think of being creative? Decision-making, number 7 skill on the list, is really that moment of marination, decision after we come up with ideas. And cognitive flexibility is really the whole picture again. Adaptability, right? Adaptability. So let me go through that again. This, again, we can all look at the recording, but Jonathan is keen to look at it again. So I just want to go through this a little bit more slowly. If we go back to that list, we see that complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, decision-making, and cognitive flexibility are all these skills. And Kath brings up a great point. She calls them soft skills. We at Human Innovation Project don't like the word soft skills at all, and we basically are calling them human skills, right? These are human skills. We are campaigning actively to get rid of the word soft skills. They're not soft, right? Everybody uses that term, but we'd like to see you change it to human skills. So creative process involves all of these steps. We're not here today to learn the creative process. That's a whole different training. But problem solving takes up the whole creative process. Really, the creative process, the innovation process, is a process of problem solving. Critical thinking, again, this comes in at the point of preparing to have ideas, and after having ideas, figuring out which ones to use. That's the number 2 skill on the WF list. The number 3 skill is called creativity. I believe by creativity, they just mean ideation, the skill of coming up with ideas. Okay. The 4th skill is number 7 on their list, is decision making. That's the decision making process, comes into the creative process again. And finally, cognitive flexibility, the number 10 skill on the list, really just adds up to adaptability, right? Being able to think differently The other 5 skills on the list are all skills that have to do with human relationships, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, service orientation, negotiation, all about how do we relate to other people. So when we look at 4IR culture, the way that we have proposed looking at a way of re-looking culture in a company is creativity, collaboration, communication, and customer service, right? Okay. I'm going to come back to that. Creativity is the skill of the future is what Forbes said, right? I said that creativity is the ability to think differently than yourself. So basically the idea of creativity that we like to propose is that in order to be truly creative, you need to be able to shift your thinking all the time, be adaptable, okay? Collaboration involves a whole lot of other skills, goals, goal setting, role playing, flexibility, mobility, and so forth. But generally, collaboration is, in a very serious way, the combination of creativity and people skills put together. So it is, in a way, the most important 4IR skill. Communication, a critical skill, right, that we don't do well enough today. Customer service, a skill that many people feel we don't even need, right? We need to be able to take care of customers all the time. You guys listening to the webinar are customers of one another. You know, other people, I'm your customer as well. We're all each other's customers, and we need to try to maintain a customer type relationship with one another, okay? So when we look at the 4 C's of culture of an organization, these are the 4 C's that we're talking about: creativity, collaboration, communication, customer centricity. We believe that the process always has to start in terms of transforming a culture. It has to start with creative thinking. It has to start with adaptable thinking. It has to start with us beginning to think differently than we already do. And only from there can we then take the time to start to learn how to communicate better, how to work together better. And finally, step into the step of how do we begin to treat each other as customers all the time, delivering what we need, what the other person needs at the best level, and being able to really actually work together. Now, you'll notice that this is a bit of a wheel, although creativity kind of starts it. It's a bit of a wheel, and that's because all of these things fit together. All of these skills involve people skills. All of these things involve creative skills. In that top 10 list of the WEF, you know, we're proposing as Human Innovation Project that it's much simpler to see it as just those 2 things that end up with these 4 specific skills that need to be worked on in order for us to participate as human beings in the revolution. And this applies to every single person, right? Not just people that have to code things. So a lot of people, and I'm closing right now, a lot of people have put a lot of questions and answers up on the chat right now around accessibility. You know, how accessible is 4IR? And for us, the first step is these kind of skills are accessible. These kind of skills, even with limited resources, even with limited access to the internet, these kind of skills can be learned, can be taught, and there are ways to make it work. You know, it might be much harder for somebody to get the ability to learn how to code or learn how to manage big data or get jobs in big companies, but the first step of transforming oneself into a person ready for the 4th Industrial Revolution, you know, these skills are able to be accessed and able to be something that people can actually, you know, learn and work with. Rihanna raises the question of courage. Let's bring that up in our interactive session a bit later. I'm going to hand over to Rapa Long now. It's going to take just a moment for her to turn up in the space, and inviting her to come in now. And I'm not seeing her. Rapa Long, please just put your hand up and bring you into space. So there's a lot of good questions and a lot of good text coming up in the chat box regarding the questions people have raised. We will have time to discuss those openly in the session after the people are all giving their talks this morning. And I'm still looking for Rapalong to raise her hand, please. There she is, and she's coming in the next 30 seconds. So thank you guys for what is obviously a much too fast rushing through of this information, but we will have all of these slides available and a recording of the whole event available. And we look forward to hearing from you all at the interactive session in about 45 minutes. Meanwhile, here's Rapalong.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Okay, it's just taking a moment longer to get Rapalong in than we are actually seeing her. So I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to Rapalong now. Here she comes. Okay, quick introduction to Rapalong, then I'm going to leave you. That introduction is to tell you that Rapalong Rabana is one of the most, I think, admired and followed people in the intellectual sphere around Fourth Industrial Revolution thinking and education in South Africa. She is the chair of Rekindle Learning, which is a company she started and which does a lot of micro-learning interventions with companies and other organizations in Africa. And she also is a World Economic Forum Young Leader internationally. And she was the MC along with a gentleman from 702 Radio of the 4IR SA event last year that was kind of sidetracked after it was held. The 4IR SA was going to kick off the whole program, but actually now it has been sidetracked into other programs. So Rapalong is now ready, and I'm going to hand over to Rapalong. I think basically she's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and certainly it has a lot to say. So let's go for it, Rapalong. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm hoping you can all hear me. Let me just check if you can. Yes, you can. All right, let me continue because I'm not hearing anything back. Great. Let me pull my slides back up and just confirm for me that you can see them again. Cool. I'm hoping you can see the slides because when I put up the slides, I can't actually see the chat room, Michael. So maybe some guidance for the next speakers who come through could help them there. So I'm assuming you can see everything I'm putting up there now. And in my conversation with you today, in terms of dematerializing learning experiences, I really just wanted to share a different perspective of how we should think about tackling learning challenges going into the future so that we are better able to develop these soft skills that we talk about so often, or essential skills or human skills, as Michael refers to them. My interest in the space really stems from my reflections on my own family, starting with my own parents that you see on the screen now. They were the first in their respective families to graduate.
Rapalong?
Yes. Yes.
We're getting a lot of messaging. We cannot see your slides. You need to share your screen.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought I had already, but let's try again. Because it says share on my side, and it says the sharing has happened. Okay, let me try this one. Can you see it now, Michael? Are you able to speak and confirm?
We can see it now.
Okay, great. Awesome. So I was saying that my interest in the learning and education space came through when I reflect on my own family and parents. And my parents are for me quite interesting because they, managed to succeed against significant odds. And when I look at the, cousins or siblings and rest of the family, there's a jarring difference. And for me, it always feels like being able to succeed as an African was like winning the lottery. And I became more curious as to how do we better understand how we democratize that kind of prosperity so that the differences aren't so jarring. And that's really the journey I've been on with Rekindle Learning, initially starting around mobile applications, around how we make it easier to learn at school and at corporate training environments. But even in the work that we're doing there, I do see that there's a whole other frontier of learning that's going to become critical in the next few years, because we know at this point that you can give someone or a nurse great content, but it doesn't necessarily make them a great nurse. And there's a lot more around mindsets and behaviors that really determine someone's ability to really perform and be highly competent. And this is an area of learning and education we haven't unpacked so much. We throw the words around a lot, but how we build for those mindsets and values and behaviors is something that we haven't quite cracked it. And that's where a lot of my thinking sort of goes on, because that's what really makes the difference, I think, between people that just get a degree, but that then not able to perform in a work environment. So as I, wanted to unpack that concept a bit more, I came to sort of conclude that when in our education and learning and development process, we're a product of what we learn as well as how we learn. And I'm going to elaborate on what that difference is for me in my mind. But the what we learn is really what's been happening already in our education environments and corporate training environments and the like. We're very effective at defining the content of what we need to do. I mean, you can see in most accredited training programs, the CETA requirements and things are very clear on the learning outcomes and what needs to be covered in terms of content. I mean, we've been doing that for quite a while. But that content in itself isn't delivering those results that we want. And we know that the half-life of content is, reduced significantly. And the people that are graduating this year have to question whether the stuff they learned in their first year of university is actually relevant. So the what is actually not getting us what we need at this point. And there's a whole lot of stats around, how people need to be reskilled in organizations, how executives believe that people need to relearn and the like, how our learning cultures are not adequate, and that the most important skills, about relearning, unlearning, and things like that. Which for me then opens the door around this question of, do we fully understand the how of learning? And for me, the how of learning is achieved by understanding the experiences someone needs to go through to actually become, a peak performer. And simply giving great content isn't going to necessarily get us there. And the how of learning is about understanding experiences of learning much more. Whereas at this point, teachers are much more taught about the what that needs to be covered, but how you design the learning experiences is less crystal clear. And, it's better understood by only a selective few at this point. So I want to start with the basic concepts, that neuroscience puts forward around how learning happens. And it's essentially just to say that learning happens when you have an out of comfort zone experience. So a challenge that you overcome that is not too small, that is boring and you're disengaged, and a challenge that's not too big that you become overwhelmed and defensive and retreat. But when you have a just right experience and you have a moment and you achieve a task and you have an I can moment, that is when a neural pathway is actually developed in our minds, and growing or learning truly happens when we develop that additional neural pathway. And this understanding of how we cultivate those experiences is actually what I think we need to be focusing a lot more. And instead of learning, what content we need to cover, do coaches or parents or managers or leaders in companies understand how to create the I can moments that are pitched not too high, not too low, for people to really be able to learn and grow in a meaningful way. And by a meaningful way, I mean the growth of neural pathways in our minds. And through this kind of thinking, I came across an interesting organization here in South Africa called ATB Transformation. And they've done some really cool work in trying to articulate stages of learning experiences, and how do we tier challenges so that we better understand what level of ability someone is at, and then position the just right challenge for them to grow to the next level. So in this simple example on the slide here, I'm really just illustrating the tiered challenges that one might go through when you learn to ride a bicycle. But this is not specifically about riding a bicycle. It could be learning how to do a proposal, how to do public speaking, or how to parent, or anything like that. And the scale is much bigger than this, but I've just taken some snippets where in this kind of thinking, they say, at the first stage at A1, when someone, is thinking about riding a bike, they have no knowledge of the controls of the bike or how to make it move. They can't sit or hold a bicycle, so they are unconsciously incompetent at this point. And to move them into that next stage of A2, you kind of want to help them understand what the end goal is by, riding the bike, maybe with them on the back, or pushing them so that they can feel how the cycling experience is supposed to be, and allow them to fail and provide the affection and positivity so that they don't become trapped in their own disappointment of not being able to do something. And that allows them to then move on to the next stage of A3, where they can ride a bicycle, they can observe others riding a bicycle and learn some tricks, and figure out how you get better at it. They are now at a stage where they are consciously sort of competent, but they still need the supporting structure and someone to give them exercises and practice routines to get better. And then ultimately they'll get to a B1 and those B levels there, where it's about now that the point where they can self-manage, they can even teach other people how to ride a bicycle and give other people exercises and become competitive and compete. And ultimately at the B2 stage, they can become a lot more original and creative, come up with their own biking routines and the like. But basically this thinking is just trying to illustrate that we can actually better understand and give people, whether they're a parent or a coach or a mentor or a leader, a means to understand how we provide learning experiences that are looking at tiered challenges. Because at each of these stages, our neural pathway development is critical, and we need those tiered challenges to truly develop our neural pathways and brain functions. And what I really like about the scale is that it kind of simplifies this thing, and good coaches or teachers have been doing this all along, but average people don't necessarily think about this. And what a lot of the neuroscience thinking around this kind of thinking suggests that it is these experiences and a multitude of these kinds of experiences that ultimately develop people that are whole brain functions, that are adaptable, that are responsive. And without learning experiences that people can immerse themselves in and truly develop the higher cortex brain functions, they're not truly learning. And this is what really worries me about the South African context, where, our traditional curriculum is very much about pushing through content and not necessarily cultivating experiences that will build behaviors, values, and mindsets and the like. And when this picture of the girl here for me is, how well are we developing her potential for adaptability? And the thing that I'm starting to work on and think through now is, given that there's generally often a shortage of very good facilitators or coaches, people or project managers that understand how you cultivate these kind of learning experiences for young people, could we begin to bridge that gap using for our technologies today, in particular the use of virtual reality? And could we use those kind of platforms to understand how we scale learning experiences, so that it's not just reliant on you having a great teacher in your classroom, having a great parent who understands how to coach you and prompt you, that even without that, you might be able to have access to those enriching experiences that truly develop your behaviors, values, and mindsets. And the idea with virtual reality, is that when you put on these goggles, it's a fully immersive experience. And you'd be able to go into scenarios that are driven by artificial intelligence, doing a whole range of things. And historically, VR has been used quite a lot for technical training. And I'm going to show you a video so that everyone can get a sense of what I mean by virtual reality and how it's used for technical training, and also talk about then how we can use this basis to launch further and use VR for other experiences as well. So let's have a look at this video as in terms of how it's being used to dramatically close the skills and competency gaps in technical training.
Today's job market is at a turning point. Overall, unemployment is low. The skills gap is growing. Employers can't find the technicians they want, and employees have difficulty getting the training they need.
The average technician in this country right now is 58 years old. As that population retires, we're going to need a new way to train a whole generation of that workforce.
For the next generation of workers, it's time to face a new reality.
Interplay and Dell have collaborated and developed what we're calling VR in a box. We're trying to make it simple and easy to get virtual reality accessible to as many trainees and technicians as possible.
We're opening doors to new applicants and educating veteran workers.
What we're talking about here is developing a training solution set capable of delivering hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Bringing harmony to the workforce so today's companies and employees can prepare for a better future.
So I hope that gives you a glimpse of how, VR has been used for technical skills training before. And now there's a whole lot more potential for it. And the reason I think it's so powerful in creating those experiences that really move us is that it takes your full attention. You can't actually be thinking about something else when you're in a VR environment. And it's an opportunity to keep practicing again and again skills that you're not sure of so that you get past your initial fears. There's no limit based on, how long a training workshop is. You can keep practicing until you get better. And we're starting to see that in other markets, in particular in the US, they've actually been using VR to develop customer service and soft and communication skills and the like. And it's going to fundamentally change how they upskill their staff. And in a recent training program that they've launched in the US, instead of bringing people into a room to actually drive the training, they've actually dispersed these VR goggles across to various branches so that people can have the experiences they need to have in order to build those mindsets, values, and behaviors. So I'm going to show you another quick video of a British company that's doing some awesome stuff in this space around building these essential soft skills. Let's have a look at that.
Emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, empathy. Leadership skills represent the biggest gap between employer expectation and today's workforce. But as humans, our capacity for these skills is not set in stone. It can be developed, improved, and sharpened, leading to better individual performance, improved team productivity, and stronger customer relationships. At Tailspin, we empower organizations to develop these skills through the use of virtual humans, AI characters that fluidly converse with users, display realistic emotion, and understand context. Our platform offers your employees exposure to difficult conversations in areas like leadership, sales, and HR that can be practiced and replayed in the safety of virtual reality. Our virtual humans are already at work at some of the world's largest organizations, where they help train workers in telecom, insurance, consumer packaged goods, and finance. These scenarios keep users engaged and excited about learning. They also offer a unique opportunity to measure performance. Our platform provides comprehensive analytics and deep insights, setting a new standard for employee performance metrics. Tails in.
So really, I know I'm out of time, so I'll just quickly tie up. For those particular young people, you know, who don't necessarily get to travel or have lots of experiences, learn how to ride a horse or swim or sit around the dinner table and hear their parents talk about challenges at work and how they tackle various issues, how they prepare for a job interview, how they prepare for a major negotiation, all of these things. How do you package those experiences so that people can actually have them without having the privileged access to a mentor or someone who has had all of those experiences before? And this is really what I'm speaking to when I talk about dematerializing sort of learning experiences, so that those experiential moments can be made more widely accessible, and we know how key they are to actually driving performance for people and organizations. So I'll leave it there. Michael, I know I'm out of time, so you can take that back.
Okay, Rob Long, if you could stop the presentation. Yep, there we go. So I'm actually having some video challenges on my side. I think some of the people that are listening or watching may be having similar challenges. But so you're not seeing my face right now, but I'm going to take us right to the next speaker, which is not going to be according to the schedule. We are supposed to have Sonkoba Vuba next, but she is actually not feeling well today. So she's trying to get us a video that she's preparing, and we'll watch it a bit later. But for now, we're bringing in Emma to do her talk, and we will be moving up the community conversation as well to be happening 15 minutes or 10 minutes earlier than on the schedule. So Rapalong, I hope that you can join us for that, and people might have some questions about your presentation, but also just generally. Looking for where Emma is. She's been invited into the room. You still with us, Emma? Okay, Emma has lost connection on her side. She's coming right back. So, in the meantime, it's a perfect moment for you to take a 2-minute break and get up and take care of anything you might want, like another cup of coffee or a glass of water. We know that many of the vices that one can participate in are not being indulged in these days. But for now, if you need to take 2 minutes, we're going to bring Emma in as soon as she reconnects. Isn't that what we need, Jonathan? We need some kind of elevator music, something. Okay. Emma's coming on now. She's reconnected, and should be in 30 seconds or so be on your screen. While we're waiting for Emma, let me give you a little introduction to Emma Kay in case you don't know who she is. I'm also struggling to get my screen on now. Interesting. So Emma Kay has an illustrious pedigree. She actually has a Wikipedia entry under her own name that other people created for her. It's not from her own desire, but other people have created a Wikipedia entry for her. If you look up Emma Kay, then you will find her on Wikipedia. And yeah, Emma Kay has basically done so many things in her life that I wanted to show you the screen. but she's the founder of many things, tech startup called Boza. She was the founder of Triggerfish Animation. She was the funder and creator of the Animation Festival in Satangi many years ago. She has produced films, documentaries, all kinds of innovative ideas. She's worked on things that are funded out of Silicon Valley. Emma has been voted in all kinds of top 100, top 10, top 5 lists. Emma Kay is a remarkable person who stays in Cape Town, was going to accidentally happen to be in, it's a great story, she was going to happen to be in Johannesburg for our live event last week. And of course, with the situation with lockdown and the changes and everything, not only didn't we have the event, Emma wasn't coming anymore. So it's hard to even understand how to contextualize the situation, but somehow, through the process of the extraordinary luck that Emma was going to happen to be in Joburg for one day on the day of our event, we have managed to have her here for the event, even though it's no longer last weekend, even though she no longer is traveling. And this is through the wonders of 3G. Emma, over to you. And not 3G, guys, sorry, of the 3IR. Emma, over to you. We do not see you, but you need to click on your camera icon for us to see you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael, for hosting this event. And it's the 4IRs, always a very hot subject at the moment, so it's great to be able to join in on the conversation. So I just want to kind of, full disclaimer, I have a house full of rescue animals, and so I'm apologizing beforehand that they tend to burst into spontaneous barking at any ways that they hear. So apologies beforehand. So I'm really focused on, as Michael said, as an entrepreneur, my kind of heartbeat is social impact. And I really want to bring the human element into the conversation about the 4IR. And in the conversations right in the beginning, it was the conversation, well, some of the comments basically said, who got left behind? And I think that's a really relevant point. And that's what I'm going to be addressing in this 15-minute slot. So let's start off looking at some figures. The United Nations in 2018 said that 64% of our South African population live in urban areas, and that is set to increase to 70% in 2030. So with this kind of rapid urbanization and growing population, we tend to see a bigger increase in inequality, unemployment, and poverty. And often digital solutions are thrown at this problem as a way of supporting socioeconomic development. Research Internet Africa, also in 2018, looked at some of our connection figures. And while we have a massive population of around 84% with mobile devices, the astonishing thing is that only 54% of our population are actually connected to the internet. So what I really want to bring up in this conversation is, where is the 3IR before we can even start talking about the fourth industrial revolution and how that means and how that impacts our communities and our population. So just as Michael said, just to give you a bit of context about me, is that I've set up several companies, as you've heard, but more recently I've been driving a foundation which was looking at stimulating the uptake of technology. And in this foundation, I birthed this concept called smart townships. So where did smart townships come about? I was part of global conversations around megacities, and the narrative basically goes like this. I'm oversimplifying it, but the narrative is megacities in the global north tend to be 10 million plus people. And those megacities need to become smart cities in order for the bulk of the population to become part of any fourth industrial revolution. I kind of challenge that and saying, in the global south, why are we using global north numbers? And if we are, that means the only megacities we really have are Kinshasa and Lagos, which are basically 10 million plus people. I'm suggesting that in South Africa, we redefine megacities to be our fastest growing communities, which are our townships. And if those are our fastest growing communities and therefore a main focus point, why are we not talking about smart townships? If we don't address smart townships, then the bulk of our population is not going to be part of any fourth industrial revolution. So if we just go back to smart cities, we heard at our latest sonar, our first smart city being proposed for Lanseria. Smart cities is not a new conversation in Africa. It's mooted across Africa from Rwanda right through to South Africa. And while I'm not dismissing it, I think that it needs to be a parallel conversation. Smart cities tend to be very much around an urban fantasy that tends to segregate amplify social and spatial segregation and inequality. It tends to be a top-down approach of putting technology into communities that are developed and relies on a digitally connected citizen. So looking back at the fact that 54% of our population are not digitally connected, where does that leave the bulk of our population living in urban environments, urban poor environments that are rapidly growing? So that's how we came up with smart townships, is that there is so much documentation out there that is encouraging a different perspective. And that is, rather than a top-down approach of smart cities, it's a bottom-up approach of engaging with community. It's smaller scale, it's more localized in terms of local communities. And with that came smart townships. So what we did was we looked at being an entrepreneur, I'm all about action and less about writing papers and kind of boardroom discussions. It was, let's make smart townships a reality. So we looked at a community here in Cape Town in Hout Bay called Imizama Yetu, and we worked with the community. It's about the citizen. It's about what are their needs as opposed to throwing technology at a so-called problem. It's what's the heartbeat of that community. And we came up with 4 key principles in terms of how we define smart, which is connectivity, affordability, digital skills and literacy, and content. So what that meant was that we engaged with rolling out connectivity. And what I mean by connectivity is Wi-Fi connectivity. We worked with a local startup who were nothing but outstanding. And we rolled out in Imizama Yetu, which is only 14 square hectares and roughly about 35,000 people. We had 100, in a space of a year, we had 120 access points in that community versus what the whole of the Western Cape province had in 2018 of 176 public Wi-Fi access points. So in Imizama Yetu, 14 square hectares, we had over 120 access points in Imizama Yetu. So whether you lived in a shack or in a spaza shop or concrete structure, you could have your very own access point. So in effect, there was a mesh network in Imizama Yetu. We created an affordable network system. So it wasn't free, it was affordable. So it was 20 Rand for 20 Rand for 1.2 gigs of data, as opposed to roughly about 100 Rand for 1 gig of data with mobile network operators. That meant in the space of a year, we retained 17.5 million Rand in that tiny community by creating affordable connectivity. So now we had connectivity and we had affordability and we had people online. The next critical thing, which is often discussed but not really addressed in a meaningful way, in my opinion, and that is digital skills. Digital skills is a very sexy subject at the moment, and I feel very strongly that there's a lot of focus around output as opposed to outcome. And what I mean by that is output is many organizations say we need to train 1 million people. It's very easy to put that 1 million people in seats and train them, but what does that mean in terms of real outcomes? Do those individuals really have digital skills? So we worked with individuals in Imizama Yetu, working specifically with women and small to medium enterprises around how to engage with them meaningfully. And what we started to see was a belief that the mobile phone was no longer just a social media device, but really about understanding that a mobile phone is a computer at its heart. And when, if you have a smart mobile device and you learn how to use it effectively, it can actually bring you into the digital world in a meaningful way. So we rolled out digital skills programming with University of Western Cape with the CoLab, with the program which is really around one-on-one FaceTime as opposed to just bringing people online. It was very, very effective. So we've now addressed connectivity, we've addressed affordability, we've addressed digital skills, and the fourth component, which is really around content. And content is so often overlooked. And what we mean by that is contextually relevant content. So we launched a hyperlocal TV channel, and I used TV in a very liberal way because the TV was not using broadcast spectrum. It was a TV channel in that we basically sat on top of our mobile network, our Wi-Fi network, so it was zero rated to anyone who went to IYTV. We trained 5 citizen journalists creating content about Imazami Yetu. So it was really around talking about issues within the community for the community, whether it be social issues, social justice issues, or just a cooking show. As we know, no township is homogenous. So in Imazami Yetu, there are people from Malawi, Zimbabwe, as well as South Africans. So a show for Malawians around, for example, a lady in Malawi has a spaza shop and she travels to Malawi every 2 weeks. Well, not anymore, but she was traveling 2 weeks every 2 weeks to get her beans, her rice, and her fish. So creating cooking shows that are relevant to different parts of those communities. Now, the reason that content is so important is it's often a very powerful onboarding mechanism for people. It's a puncture point into introducing them into the internet. So by using relevant content in the community, we brought them onto our portal, our TV portal. And on that portal, we then had a whole bunch of educational programs. So we had animation, courtesy of Triggerfish Animation for the early childhood development process in terms of kids who are at home, who can engage with their mobile devices, their parents' mobile devices, and watch animation, educational animation. We had science, maths, matric information. We had health issues. We had a whole bunch of information that people could engage with and access for at a zero-rated level. Then we also had the first hyperlocal informal business directory. So essentially what that meant was that we had over 120 business listings in that community, whether it be a beauty shop or a clothing shop or a restaurant. So it basically brought the community together, and we started to share information. So we really built an ecosystem around what that meant to be an active participant and a citizen on an affordable internet network. It was the birthing of what we define as a smart township. So in other words, the bottom-up approach, engaging people in a meaningful way. The next step was to really look at the kind of the sexy stuff around IoT. So in other words, why are dustbins in metropolitan areas tagged for efficient waste removal, but why are there no tags on chemical toilets and bucket toilets for efficient human waste removal? So these are points to illustrate that a bottom-up approach in developing smart townships is a really critical conversation to be had running in parallel with smart cities. And the bringing the citizen into the conversation, bringing the community into the conversation is really critical if we are going to have any meaningful 3IR before we even start to talk about the 4IR and how we participate on a global level. If we don't, I believe that our gaping hole around digital inequality is going to become even bigger. And sadly, as COVID is illustrating to us, without effective 3IR, without effective access to digital communications, our education and our work environment is becoming a bigger, the inequality is becoming bigger. So we're very privileged to be on our devices looking at a webinar. Kids can be on Team at Microsoft when they're sitting at home. What happens if you're sitting in a township with no access to internet and you have no access to your offline or your online homeschooling, or indeed being able to get online for work issues. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, and I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions that come up. And as Michael said, I'd love this to be an interactive process. But I just really would like to leave you with the thought that in all the conversations we hear over and over and over again around Fourth Industrial Revolution, is we need to really, really have an impact in the third IR to make sure that the growing population living in townships are not left behind. And that is the human element that we need to be careful of not losing. So over to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Emma, for that. I think everybody's probably got a lot from based on what's happening in the chat space there. We have, so Sonroba Vuba is going to join us, but not at the correct time. She is not feeling well, which we, in today's world, always gets very concerning. You know? But she's busy making a video of herself giving her talk, and she's going to introduce the video. What we're going to do is put it right at the end of the day, and so hopefully she'll feel a bit better by then. So at 12:30, she will actually give us a kind of way forward by giving us sort of what are the plans for South Africa as a government and as a nation, right? In terms of what's going to happen next. We did want to put that in the context of this conversation, but I think there's a lot of information, a lot of chat going on already about what has been presented. So I think we can let her heal a bit for the next couple hours and join us a bit later. I think everybody's fine with that, I imagine. Or put up your hand, please, if you're not okay with that. I didn't think so. But I do want to ask people to put up their hands if they would like to join the chat. We have space for, I believe, at least one more person. We have Rapalang and Emma on board to lead the conversation. My partner in the Human Innovation Project, Beth Aronsa, who many of you may know, she is also the head, I don't know what the title is, of the South African Creative Industries Incubator in Pretoria, and is also one of the founders, along with her husband, Freddie, of the Tshwane School of Music. She's also, very importantly, the chairperson of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution for the Future of Work. So she knows quite a bit about what is going on in this area. And I've asked Rahana Musaji to join us as well, as she had a lot to say in the chat. So I'm bringing Rahana in. Now, anybody who's coming in from the audience, please note that you need to turn on your camera and your sound in order to join us. So can those of you who are on here, please turn on your camera and your sound for this conversation. I'm going to leave space open for us to add one more person after Rihanna joins us. And what we're going to do is, if you feel you have something that you really want to say, and you want to say it in depth and yourself with your own voice, raise your hand and I'll bring you into the room. It takes about 60 seconds for this software to bring you from your home into this room, right? So, as you see, I've already admitted Rihanna, and she's not here yet. It takes a moment. So when you raise your hand, I'll bring you into the room about a minute before you need to start speaking. You need to do exactly what these amazing people have all done, which is turn on your sound and your microphone, or we will not see or hear you. I'm still waiting for Rihanna to appear, but I think while we wait for her, well, she's also lost connectivity. So people are really struggling with these cables down, eh? So Rihanna's coming back on, and we'll bring her in. But let's, for now, get started. Beth, you can go ahead. I'll depart and just run the machinery in the background.
Great. Morning, everyone. Great to be with you. And I think we've had incredible presentations so far. I want to ask you if you could put your questions you would want to pose to Emma or to Rapalang, scroll them up the slide for us so that we can respond to some of those. But ladies, both of you have touched on critical issues this morning. I want to pick up with a question that came up more than once, and we've heard it a lot with the work we've done with the Commission. So this is all fantastic, but we don't have running water, we don't have electricity in the townships. There's more important needs. How do we respond to that? And that's a common question we've found with everyone. We know we can't afford not to, It's not either 4IR or something else. It's already happening. We have to be we have to play catch up in a way. But how would you respond to this? Should I start with you, Emma?
Sure. I mean, I think I alluded to it when I started. Is I don't think it's an either-or conversation. Is that your work within the Commission around the 4IR is a critical conversation in terms of as to bring us in line with an economic growth. Globally, it's a growing sector, and if we don't keep up, we will be left behind. So it's a really important part of the macro conversation. But what I'm suggesting is that without dealing with some of the we call them smart township issues around bringing the bulk of our population into line with just basic connectivity, we're widening that gap, and that gap is growing daily without effective rollout of affordable connectivity in tandem with effective outcome-driven digital skills. So it can't be just a technology solution, which is often looked at in terms of, as I say, supporting socioeconomic development. Technology is not the solution. It's about working with communities. It's about working with the citizen and understanding what their key needs are and making sure we work with them in the technology application.
Now, I often that we don't get the outcome in our education system of necessarily having young people who are able to think critically, problem solve, really operate in that space. And largely, a lot of us involved in spaces where we're trying to address those types of issues around teaching and learning and so on. And yet, my work that I do, which is counter-based, I have not yet found a young person that we've worked with who is not highly creative, highly innovative. We have a wealth of incredible young minds in our communities. And there just seems to be this disconnect with putting all these pieces together. So, Dr. Lang, how do we, the work you do, the work Emma's doing, we have brilliance already in our young people, in our youth. We refer to the demographic dividend, which is our greatest asset as a continent and as a country, which is a huge number of young people. And this is really where we need to be focusing, even as a country, economically and everywhere else. And 4IR gives us opportunities now to leapfrog, and we use all these terms. Practically, how are we going to do this and do this quickly and in a meaningful way that doesn't leave people behind, that is from the ground up? You have spoken to some of that, but just elaborate a little. And I think we've now got Rihanna on board as well. Can you turn your camera on, Rihanna?
Hi, sorry, I lost connectivity for a while.
Thanks. I hope you heard the question. Feel free to jump in on this one, because it is a matter of reaching youth and making opportunities available for youth, and that is in our community, townships, etc. Ladies, who would like to pick up the line?
Yeah, well, just to tag on to what Emma was sharing, I think the kind of work that she's doing is super, super critical. And I'm really hoping that with this advent of the coronavirus and things, it's become really, really apparent to governments and private sector that people really do need access to high quality internet in order to be able to be informed, to be economic participants, even in the advent of this. And for a while, it's been a lot of talk, but not really fundamental belief. And I think the virus has really compelled us to see just how critical that role is. And I'm hoping it's changed the minds and perspectives of senior leaders in this country. The other thing that I think will be important is that it's the same kind of situation where we had many years ago when cars were kind of being built and there were no sort of roads being built at the time. So you had a utility, a car, but you didn't have infrastructure and roads. And it was only until people truly understood the value of cars to them that governments started to invest more in road infrastructure. And we kind of have the similar situation here with internet access and the services that you can access on the internet. And it's always going to be this tension and tug of war situation where over and over we have to keep demonstrating the utility to people of what is the meaningful impact on education, on economic opportunities, on getting jobs, on health information, all of these things, so that the utility of internet access is no longer just a nice idea or a cute suggestion kind of thing, which is often what I really think happens in the minds of senior leaders. And so we've got to keep pushing the utility and the services that have demonstrable impact, because that will also continue to then justify the required investment for that internet infrastructure to go further and deeper into our communities. So I think those things have to keep happening sort of at the same time, so that, yeah, we ultimately get that access to everyone who needs it.
Great. Welcome, Rihanna.
Sorry, guys, I'm just jumping in on sound for a second. Emma?
Yes.
I believe that your notifications are beeping. It was happening while you were speaking, and it's still happening. Are you able to
Super irritating.
stop them? Or perhaps mute yourself when you're not talking, at least, so that they don't pop up. Look, we're getting a lot of reports from out there, people dropping off, people coming back on. The cables off the coast were damaged very badly a few days ago. So I don't know if people are having this problem, but as we talk about accessibility, it's not just people that don't have money to buy data. It's even us who do have privilege and money. I've got a bunch of people that have raised their hands, Beth, to ask questions. So I think we should bring them in. Is that cool?
Let's do that. Who have you bringing in?
Well, the first person is someone who actually asked a question on the chat, and that is Jeanne, I think, Jeanne Geldenbloem. I'm going to ask her to come in, and then we have two other people who've raised their hands so far. So Dawn Ashrick and Kath Croxton, or Ashrick Dawn, sorry, and Kath Croxton are both waiting as well after that. So
Perhaps while we wait for
I can give you the question.
Should we not respond to the questions in the chat as well, or?
Well, let's.
I want to respond to Jonathan's question.
Here's the question in the chat, right? You can read it there in the chat as we're waiting for her to come in.
All right, so let's do Jonathan's question, which is, what is your view on how to support the individual's personal accountability to learn? We have to get people out of the mindset of passive recipients of learning and unleash their own hunger and accountability to learn, empower them to chart their own course. Who would like to respond? Rihanna? Rapalang, either one?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to tackle that. I didn't get enough time to sort of go into it in my presentation, but what I was referring to in those different stages of learning starts to tackle that question a lot. Someone won't learn something until they have what they call an affective context, an emotional connection, and a desire to do that learning because it's now emotionally relevant to who they are and what they're trying to do in their lives. And often that kind of connection is only established through an experience. And this is why the experiential learning moments is so important in cultivating learning. Because that's just how the mind works. You've got to start by creating the emotional connection first before you actually give the content. And it's part of what I'm saying, that teachers and parents and leaders need to be able to understand which stage someone is in their learning process so that you position the right tools. And I'm hoping with what I was hinting at with the virtual reality is that often you might want to tell people, it's important not to litter. But if you haven't had an experience where you've seen the severe consequences of littering and what it might be in 10 years' time, which you could create in a VR environment, you're not going to create the emotional connection to that learning, which would drive the self-learning that you're looking for, as an example.
I'm not seeing Janae yet, but just on that point, there was a few questions earlier around people can only be creative if they feel valued, if they feel they have a voice, that creativity and all these human skills start with a certain degree of personal development and personal awareness and all of those types of things. And that is something that is not necessarily factored into the way we teach and the way we learn as a foundational element currently. Would any of you like to comment on that or add to that thought?
Simon, I think, can you hear me, Beth?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think just to pick up on what Rapeleng's saying, and having been, trained as an educator, having served in the local government sphere, and now doing some work with networks of cities and so forth, the notion that we learn through our heads as opposed through our hearts and our other senses, and the notion that you've just raised on experiences, and everybody has a heart, but our education system assumes that we're filling people's heads. So something as basic as the ability to listen rather than the ability to articulate is something that's valued. Articulation, the ability to speak, and just listening and empathy as a deep skill. So very much, Emma, in relation to the kind of work that has happened in your project. And, my desire is really that there's fantastic stuff happening out there. How do we begin connecting people who are doing amazing things so that we really scale up as quickly as possible some of these interventions? And the notion that smart cities or smart townships is about technology as opposed to smart thinking about real issues and how to solve those.
We're struggling to get Janae on board. I'm going to go ahead and just ask her a question. She's asking, how do we solve for retraining and reaccreditation of educators to upskill them in order to be the lead to the learners? I think of other professional occupations which require annual CPD points in order not to lose their accreditation, but teachers are only qualified once, and some that might be more than 20 years ago. As an educator, maybe you want to just start us off there, Rihanna, and others could add.
So, I think part of the challenge is that often for many of our educators who are still in the system, who stay despite fairly difficult conditions, that often their worldview is the institution they've trained in and then the perimeters of the school fence. So for educators to actually be able to be linked into initiatives, that I know that Louise van Rijn with Partners for Possibility, for example, is working on the notion of leadership and school leadership teams together with private sector. But I think it's really about our notion that learning happens on a course, learning happens in a classroom, as opposed to the building of a culture of we could constantly be learning if we were lifelong learners and open to see every experience and every interaction as a learning one. And, that isn't necessarily, I think, about points and accreditation, but it is about building a mindset of lifelong learning, which, I think we just don't have enough of.
And I think
So
one of the I was going to say, one of the big concerns about that retraining and continuous learning, I thought, was how the sort of teacher unions are organized at this point, or a number of the labor unions that are often quite resistant to sort of these training and reaccreditation efforts because they fear that a number of their members won't requalify or pass and therefore lose their jobs. There's a lot of that tension with labor unions as well around this reaccreditation issue, and I'm not quite sure how we deal with that in South Africa.
Yeah, that was a very big issue with some of the consultations we did with the Commission. There's a resistance to any type of change to the current status quo when it comes to teaching from the union. But once you sit down with individuals and you actually start to talk about some of the issues that are now, and they understand that it's not getting rid of teachers, but it is actually just changing the way that teachers, there's a new role for teachers, which is to be facilitators of learning instead of purveyors of a whole bunch of knowledge content they're dumping on kids. There is room to move there, but it's going to take quite a bit of work in this country to get it shut. And our big issue is, do we have the time? We've got to see quite a quick turnaround. So the Commission report it was usually coming out just before the shutdown, but with all of this now, I'm not sure when we'll release it. But essentially, when we looked at the entire skills ecosystem, there's huge disconnect within the ecosystem. We call for a review of quite a few things. So hopefully these kinds of discussions, the report is out as a point of departure for engagement and for solid strategies that can really be put together by people who are on the ground doing a lot of these things. So I think we're all thinking along the same lines, and hopefully a lot of this can be fed into strategies for the country that take things forward. Would you like to add in on there in terms of teaching and educating? It may not be directly your field, but from your perspective of where you are working, how do you get the schools and what's the connection with the whole education system in what you're doing?
Sorry, Beth, I didn't hear. Were you putting that question to me?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, you working in a community where you are sort of creating a whole different model. How do you engage in, or maybe not, with the education system? Do you find you have to go around it and just do your own thing? Or is it possible to sort of bring the system along?
So, I mean, it's a really difficult question that I'm not sure that I'm equipped to answer or that I have the answer to. Is that we haven't been working with the schools for a variety of reasons. It became quite bureaucratic, a lot of red tape in terms of getting into the schools. So we tended to work with the out-of-school young women and SMEs specifically around our digital skills and learning. However, the citizen journalists that we were working with worked very closely with the schools, and in fact, most of them are actually mentors within the schools. And what that illustrated to me was the deep impact around peer leadership and role models, which we hear about all the time. But again, it's for me, I'm less of an academic and not a great reader of proposals and documents. It's about seeing the impact on the ground, where the rubber hits the road. And that for me was a palpable experience of seeing how the young leaders were kind of really regarded as being influential, as being someone to look up to. And so what I started to see is that those role models are becoming more and more diluted in terms of people coming out of the schooling system. That, just to quote some of the figures in my Stanford creative, 56% of our grade 3 learners are functionally illiterate. So, when you've got that kind of level of literacy, you are very reliant on your community to help you it needs to be a porous process. I'm going to learn from my peers, and what does that look like? And if you don't have more role models, that becomes more of a diluted experience. So that's my kind of experience in terms of the education system, is just seeing the people engage with one another and what that looks like. I don't know if that addressed your question at all, Beth.
Great, thank you. Yes, it does. I have a question here for Rapulang. So from Kenneth, who just read a document you compiled on developing a country agenda regarding multiple stakeholders, especially in energy like Eskom. How do you think Eskom is to address load shedding and be innovative to a more sustainable approach long term regarding renewable? Will it be able to answers regarding energy, which is essential? Can you solve Eskom's challenges for us? Quickly, please. It's quite a question.
Beth, while Rapulang ponders that, while Rapulang ponders that, I just want to suggest that after this question, Kath has been waiting patiently for her comment. I see her on screen there, but she's now in the room with you. So when we finish with this comment, I think let's do Kath, and then we're going to have to start looking at taking a brief break.
Great. I'm not sure that you still have your audio.
Audio on now, sorry?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, great. Yeah, I was saying that I'm not an energy expert, so I really don't know Eskom's approach going forward, what would be ideal. But from my sense, they're not really struggling from a technology problem. It's a lot more of the cultural and poor leadership challenges there, where they simply didn't plan for the long-term outputs of the country. And at this point, we need to question the leaders we've put in now typically always just incentivized on these short-term outcomes. So if you're not incentivized to keep, the facilities running in 15 years' time, they won't do that. And that's really what we're seeing, I think, with the Eskom situation. And it speaks a lot to, the decline in leadership that we saw in the Zuma era over the last 10 years. And it's that we need to fix that before we even get to the innovation and types of technologies and things like that. Are we incentivizing our leaders for a longer term period, especially in the energy sector where nothing really happens in 2 or 3 years?
Okay.
Kath,
Michael, I'm not seeing Kath.
Beth, before
Michael?
I'm going to interrupt Kath a very quick moment. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So one quick addition to what I was saying, and those educators online will have, I'm sure, much more to say and more value than I can add. One thing I do see over and over and over and over again is the lack of focus on early childhood development. So for me, that's a really critical process of how we change the next cycle of potential leaders, new learners that are coming out of the system. Is that those first 1,000 days, the early childhood development needs to be addressed. So, the informal versus the formal early childhood development centers that we're seeing in informal settlements, whether it be Dunoon, Joe Slovo, Masi Pumuleli, Imazami Yetu, is you need to jump through so many hoops to become a formal early childhood development center. And if you don't, then you basically just create an informal environment, and there's no real structure or learning for those kids. And for me, that's the critical stage that we need to be looking at. So that would be my impassioned plea in terms of the education system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that. I think Rapeleng referred to cognitive development in her talk, and I don't think enough attention is paid to the different stages of learning and cognitive development, the balance between the arts and the role that plays in the cognitive development of children, as well as we're so heavy on STEM subjects as a percentage of Save the World on its own, but without the artistic and humanities side, this more balanced view of developing human beings, which is becoming more and more critical in this time, and that all starts with CCD. So I'm absolutely in agreement with that. Michael, I know we have a time constraint, and I'm not seeing Kath. I don't know if you are able to advise. I don't see her question on the feed, and I don't see her on the screen. Could you tell me?
I do see her on the screen, and I think let's let her go ahead. And I think I'm not sure if others see her or not. You guys see Kath? Yeah, everybody sees Kath. It's fine. Just let her go ahead.
Kath, go ahead with your question. Hi, Kath.
We see Kath, but we don't hear Kath. Kath, you need to turn on your microphone, please.
Oh.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Now you turned off your video.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, we can hear you, but you turned off your video at the same time. There you go. Now we're good.
And you can hear me too. Okay. Okay, so basically I want to bring everybody back to what I think, because it just feels to me a little bit like this conversation is getting on a higher and higher and higher level around theory, around teaching and learning, and actually a lot of stuff that we all know, all of us actually know. Mostly we are talking to ourselves about stuff that we know.
Kath,
but
are you hearing you?
Can you hear me? Can I carry on? So my concern and our concern, the reason we are here is about how we can.
Michael, hearing Kath as far as I can tell. Perhaps she could put a question on the feed that we could.
Can everybody else hear me? No sound.
Yeah, Beth, I think the problem is your side. That's just Kath is doing fine.
Okay. So what I was saying, I would like to bring us back down to basics. We've talked about it at different times. Emma's talked about it quite a lot. You know, we are all connected, but what about the rest? And we've touched upon it here or there, everything else. One of the things we know is that whether you're 3 in an ACD centre or whether you are 50, age 50, sitting in a township, connected or not, we learn by doing. That we can all agree with. So we can talk around the theory around that forever, but what are we actually doing to make a difference right now on the ground? That's the thing. I would like to see some real solutions. There are lots of solutions up here. As the more I engage in this topic and the more I'm kind of part of this world, all I see is a lot of stuff happening and a lot of talk and a lot of noise up there, and it is not happening on the ground with the people that actually we need to see to be part of this conversation. So Emma also talked about the importance of the role of the mobile phone versus the computer. So I think I just want to throw a reality check in here. It's not really a question, but people can follow with their thoughts and their answers. We need real solutions that actually can be scaled up. Somebody else mentioned that before. They can involve they can involve smartphones. We can't just roll out access. People need skills. And how do you do that? They learn by doing, and they learn by having fun. We need to bring everybody on board, and this needs to be a concerted national and international actually approach. And the people like us who kind of know the theory and talk and up there, something needs to happen down there. Something real needs to bridge that gap. So yeah, role models is great, but how do you make that? How do you scale that up? We can have Emma's little smart township thing, which is great, but it never got scaled up and rolled out. It was another experiment that never happened beyond where it happened. So that's my frustration. And it probably should be our frustrations. And if we're all getting together to have this conversation, let's actually have some action points that really work. So that's what I wanted to say.
I'd actually like to respond to that. So, Kath, so my little experiment wasn't necessarily little, and it wasn't necessarily an experiment. It had tangible outcomes. The reason it didn't scale was because I was running foundation single-handedly and was not able to run funding proposals in tandem with that. So that's basically why I'm proselytizing smart townships, so that we can actually, the model was very scalable and should be scaled. It's just a question of funding, whether it comes from private sector or public sector. So the outcomes are tangible. I'm not suggesting that we have a solution to everything that you're putting on the table, of which are very real issues. I'm not sure anyone does have the solution, hence this conversation around a whole bunch of people around the table. But I do agree with you that blue sky thinking and hypotheses, that time is done, and we run out of time for that. It's about what can be applied and what can be practical in terms of moving the needle in terms of social impact. And I think that's the conversation. And it's about being able to come together to really look at how we can scale things effectively. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And I agree with you. You also mentioned at one point about linking up initiatives.
Right. Ladies, anyone of you would like to add anything?
No, I don't have anything specific to add now. I just didn't get what was Kath proposing then that would scale. I didn't hear that part.
What I was proposing really was that we need to focus on the solutions, whatever those solutions may be. And I mean, maybe the smart townships is the way forward, but it's kind of, all I hear is blue sky thinking the higher level stuff, and it would be just so nice to see.
Are we hearing Kath?
So, Kath, I'm not sure that, what I'm hearing is actually many little initiatives which before getting on this call, I knew nothing about. And certainly, Emma, I'm really keen. I'm doing some work with City Support Program at National Treasury and really keen to link what you've done into some of the programs there. But I did post a comment that often we seem to be focusing on leadership to the exclusion of the system. And some of the work that I've been doing really indicates that the challenges are systemic. It's often not the people in the system. It's the fact that the system itself is broken and needs to be transformed. And I think if we could scale the voices that enable people to say, what would an alternative system look like? Because right now we know the system is broken, but what is the alternative to the current system? And so, Michael, when you were presenting, I really had a sense that the two additional C's have to be courage and confidence. A lot of people in those systems know that the systems are broken. They're just too petrified to do anything to begin to change the system. And I think the one thing that COVID-19 has done is to show that when you break the rules of the system, suddenly other things become possible that were just not happening.
So the silver lining of COVID-19.
Hopefully there'll be more than one for everything that we're going through.
Well, maybe that is kind of.
Okay, so ladies, there are a number of other questions. We are having another panel type engagement a little later in the program, but I do need to hand back to Michael now. Thank you very much for your inputs, and I want to encourage the participants, please keep putting your questions and your comments on the feed. We are seeing them and we try to feed them into the next discussion that we have. Michael, can I hand over to you to take us into the next phase? And thank you, ladies. It's nice to have a panel, ladies.
Sure. Nobody needs to go anywhere yet. I was trying to get, just so you know, I was trying to get Ashrik Dawn into the conversation, but that person has apparently disappeared. I don't know. I clicked on them to come in and they didn't arrive. But Beth, if we could just kind of contextualize this whole conversation that just happened, maybe, oh, now Ashrik Dawn has arrived. So maybe we can get the last point from this guest, and then from there move on. We're going to have a brief break, and then after the break we have a whole new section about how do you actually make these skills a reality. Maybe Karabo Moloko is speaking, and I'm going to ask Karabo, because she's listening now, if we can slightly twist her talk to deal with everything that's been said. But Beth, if you had to summarize this as the host of the conversation, what could you say we've come up with? Because I think Kath's point was really good, right? That we need to take something out of this that's concrete. What would you say we could take out that's concrete?
Do you want Ashrik to go first before we sum up, Mike?
I think go ahead and let's just let Ashrik make a point, and then we'll move from there.
Look, I think everyone is grappling with the implementation challenges and issues. We all know what needs to happen. We all know what the challenges and the problems are. And I found over a lot of consultations around our issue and skills last year, the work I've had to do, that everybody even agrees broadly on how we need to proceed and what needs to take place and what the skills are that are needed in the townships and so on and so on. But it's this thing of implementation, and it's where we South Africans over and over and over get tripped up. We have the best, most beautiful plans and documents in the world. We don't implement well. And I think we need to move the conversation, hopefully, and I hope today's platform is a catalyst for that. The conversation needs to move beyond the point of us being able to articulate all the things we are aware of and start to really think about the solutions we don't have yet and engage in those processes with each other. And that can only be a collaborative process. That is why we as Human Innovation Project have tried to create this type of platform, because Emma's doing a piece Rapelan is doing a piece, and what they're doing is working, but we do have the issue of the need to scale and scale urgently. So I don't know if I'm really touching on all the points everybody raised. We do have a systemic issue. We don't have systems leadership, unfortunately, in South Africa as an approach to leadership from the top. I would say that summing what we've heard today is very real, very relevant. But the challenge is, can we move forward from everything that we know is needed in the skilling and reskilling space, and start to really look at coming up with the solutions we don't have, acknowledging we don't know, and say, hey guys, let's all sit around the table and do this together. So Michael, I hope that sums it up. But the theme for today was really looking at skills that are needed in the African context and how we're going to do this. What are the human skills? So I think it's relevant. We tend to go back to the system a lot in our discussion because that is where a lot of the problems are. But how are we going to take this forward? So can we take that as a challenge? And when we talk about the HIP Alliance later and some of the programs we're hoping to take forward is to create these platforms where we can actually start to creatively and critically and problem solve for this as a collaborative.
Okay, fantastic. I think let's give a quick space to Ashrik Don. We need you to turn on your screen and your camera and your sound, please. And then from there, we're going to take a quick break, and whatever Ashrik has to share, we can pick up in the next community engagement, which will be a bit later. The break will result in part 2 of our conversation, which is going to be about how do we actually implement some of these skills, and not taking account of the questions around access in the presentations necessarily, but at least we will be able to do that in the community engagement. So here we have Ashrik.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I'm a teacher at Klapmuts Primary. It's a rural school here just outside Cape Town. Now, the problem that we normally have in the rural areas is access to resources. But with that said as well, we as teachers, we need to sometimes be resourceful in getting the resources, and we need to upskill ourselves. So just in the question of how do we get the real solutions to the problems we're currently having, what I suggest is that we start small with innovation hubs. If we look at the VR technology that can be used, many of the teachers really on the floor is really scared of technology. They still have the mindset of we don't want to change. So I would suggest to start off with the teachers that are really willing and want to change, because change will happen. But we need to start with the people that really wants to change and then lead this revolution. Because at the end of the day, our kids is suffering because many of the teachers don't want to change and don't want to adapt and don't want to integrate technology into their lessons. So for example, we talk about e-learning, and we're talking about VR, we're talking about coding, robotics, and there is a lot of teachers that want to learn more, but also there is a lot of other stuff like curriculum, content that need to be addressed. For example, teachers are complaining that they don't have enough time because they need to finish the content with the learners. In the other end, the learners is complaining the lessons are boring because they're only learning content. So we need to find real solutions for our educators and for our kids to go forward. And I would suggest innovation hubs. Why don't we start innovation hubs at certain schools where we can introduce certain technologies in partnership with the private sector? Because private sector really needs the learners from today as tomorrow's workforce. So private sector need to buy in and actually support and give us some of these resources like VR technology, coding and robotics, resources to start project-based learning and to address some of these real problems in our schools. So for now, I'm struggling with, for example, getting content to my learners uh, through the internet. So we are using WhatsApp as one means of getting information out, but we are really at a disadvantage in the rural space for online learning. And I think the initiative smart cities, smart townships needs to become a reality, because we are depriving our learners of actually accessing and information and really learning. So that is my point. And just one thing, something short. I've started coding in robotics at my school with no resources. It's just drawing up a plan and connecting with private sector. And currently our program is doing really well. And this is kids that is from a rural space. They never worked on computers, never worked coding robotics. This is our second year in it, and we have grown from no resources to sort of well resourced. So we have now a drone program. We have robotic cars. The kids are building using recyclable material, and you can see the growth what's happening in the kids. And these kids learn better through doing and experiencing and making the connection, solving real world problems. So it is sure that is from me.
Beth, your mic is not on.
Great contribution, great idea. And I'm going to invite you to join the alliance later that we're going to talk about, because we want to feed all of these ideas into some of the possible ways forward and solutions that we work on. Unfortunately, we have to end this panel section right here. Michael, I'm going to give back to you to just tell us exactly what's going to happen next and give us the times.
We are running a little bit behind time, and not a lot, about 10 minutes behind what the schedule said. Karabo Moloko is next. We had scheduled to have a 15-minute break leading into her, and we are going to cut that to a 10-minute break. So we will restart about 5 minutes after 11. So please come back at 5 minutes after 11. Take a break for 10 minutes to take care of whatever you need to, and I'll leave the schedule up for people to see when while they're busy with their break. Okay. Thanks everybody so far, and I hope you're enjoying. While we're on the break, I'm also going to send out to you a very simple poll, and it is now being published. I believe you can see it on your screens. I hope so. Are you able to see it? Someone tell me in chat if you're able to see the poll. No one's telling me. Okay. I would like to ask that while we're on the break as well, get a quick type into the box what you think of what's happened so far, what you'd like to see happen in the second presentation, and basically how things have been going for you. So quick comment about that, quick entry into the poll, and we'll see the poll results at the end, and be back in 10 minutes. See you. Hello, it's about 6 minutes past. So let's greet our next speaker. It's Karabo. But before Karabo starts to talk, I just want to check, everybody I can see is still here, but are you here? In other words, are you actually at your computer or your phone right now? Or are you still getting coffee? So please type into the chat right now and let me know if you're back. If not, we'll wait about 1 more minute, try to get people back. But it is time now to start again. And I want to make sure you're all here to hear Karabo. I went to get some coffee. Rihanna's here. Angela's here. Jonathan's here. That's all good. All good. Look at all the people that are here. Fantastic. Okay, so are we interested to know, Karabo, are we interested to know the results of that survey? Your sound is not on yet.
There we go. Very interested to know.
Okay, so the poll was, what is the most important challenge we're facing around 4IR? What do you think the answer was? Is that your answer?
Leadership.
That's yours.
That was
okay,
my,
well,
let's hear.
It's not leadership. It's access.
Access.
Leadership did come pretty high, though. Look, access and leadership, pretty much everybody on this call is saying that the idea that it's money is silly, right? The idea that it's information, nobody said yes. A little bit of people saying knowledge, which is, good, because I think it from my side, mostly what I've been involved with, but leadership did come in close to access. Huh?
Which makes absolute sense. Absolute sense. And I think I'll definitely allude to that in a moment and why we're seeing those two coming up quite strongly.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think it looks like lots of people are back from getting coffee. And if I had to choose, I would rather look at and listen to you than me. So I'm going to now step away and let you start.
Perfect.
Thanks. And I should introduce you. You're a quite young, quite powerful-minded individual who has stepped into a gap that opened up yesterday. And I wanted to actually mention, good time to mention that. Yolanda Stain works for First National Bank. She's a major innovative figure, has done lots of work with things that you guys use at FNB, is not able to come today. She's very sorry, but FNB is working about 16 hours a day. So the beautiful luck of that is that we've ended up with you. Right? And,
exactly.
I think what you have to add right now is going to be really, really important to the rest of the conversation today up until lunchtime. So thank you for stepping in. And
absolutely.
Just generally, thank you very much for what you're about to add. Thanks.
Absolutely. And absolute honor. Thank you, Michael, and the team, and to everyone to be part of this conversation. My name is Karabo, and I run a strategy consulting firm that really primarily focuses on digital strategy. When we think about the 4IR challenge, and hence the survey came out that way, we look at really two pillars that are going to make us successfully enter into this revolution as Thrive, as individuals, as nations, and as basically companies. We have the systemic part, which is one side, and the skill side. When I talk about the systemic part, I'm specifically alluding to things like technology, access to that technology, the relevant government policies that enables us to utilize the tech. However, and if you attend any typical 4IR conference today, you know the conversations always are rotating around the technology or the systemic challenges. And I can tell you right now, if today we were to roll out 5G, if today we were to bring access to every home and effectively democratize access to 4IR capability, we would still not be able to thrive and unleash our fullest potentials as individuals and as a nation. Why? Because the skills component, which is why the conversation we're having today is critical, is we haven't developed it. We're not ready. We're not there. We haven't done the necessary work to get our people ready to work and operate and thrive in the fourth industrial revolution. And so there is a space in which we need to drive advocacy and push for initiatives that open up the landscape and access and to the right technology, to fourth industrial revolution technology, not even 3IR. Because that technology will definitely allow us to solve significant of the nation's problems without trying to batter with old solutions that don't work anymore. However, we have a significant role to prepare our people, especially our young people. Now, I specifically work with corporates, really supporting them put together a digital strategy as well as a workforce transition plan. And I can tell you now that from a corporate perspective, they are also equally struggling with the conversation around reskilling people or being able to have a workforce that is ready to operate in the fourth industrial revolution. And that looks like when we talk about the people factor in corporates and in their strategy, we primarily focus on how do you grow the people within your organization to be future ready, as well as prepare your future workforce, because we need to bring in a lot more people in the economy and we need to bring in a lot more young people. And I can tell you now, even, it's so easy to look at government and say, what are you doing? I can tell you from a private sector, they are not ready. As a matter of fact, I deal with boards, excos, and executive teams, and a lot of them, even at the personal level, are struggling with the change and the transition in thinking, in competencies, in skills, like we're talking about, that the fourth industrial revolution demands. CEOs are struggling to adapt personally, bearing in mind that, a CEO's tenure is 5 years, and in this economy, the shareholder pressure on CEOs is tremendous. So what I'm finding in organizations and their strategies around the fourth industrial revolution, especially the human component, is that a lot of them are short-sighted. They are trying to find the short-term gains, which look like quickly automating, quickly bringing AI, quickly cutting down costs. And there isn't, and they don't know how to fit in the bringing in and empowering the human workforce to be able to leverage that intelligence that they have in the organization in the short term as well. It was alluded to a little bit earlier that really we cannot talk about the human component without bringing in the conversation of courage, of resilience. And I can tell you now, courage has to begin at the top. So those of you that selected leadership as in the poll, I am so with you. The technical side on access, and then the leadership question has to be brought. And there, there's quite a bit of change that needs to happen around giving executive teams a lot more capacity to reinvent their organization, people-centric. because the human capital, and there comes that word again, we won't debate that, is really going to be the differentiating factor. You know full well, with the fourth industrial revolution is really coming the commercialization of tech, of solutions. Right now, to build an app, to have a platform, that's stuff you can buy. You don't have to build it. And as an IT professional, as an example, I can tell you, long it was about capital buying data centers. Now we get that stuff in the cloud. So when you bring in a 4IR technology, the only thing that is left to compete on is really everything that lies in the human capacity, which is around knowing your customers, which is around being innovative and really creatively solving real problems. And when we talk about this conversation around human skills in a third world country, we are interested in local solutions that solve local relevant problems. So I can tell you now that stuff cannot be imported from the US or any first world country. Those solutions have to come from our people. So what does that mean for you and I? And when I ask that, I'm specifically talking about what does this mean for you and I as professionals in the workplace and those coming into the workplace around future-proofing our skills. And what does it mean for you and I around those of us that are advocates and that are driving initiatives right now in the nation to bring as many people into the economy as possible. And I got a beautiful sense that we have a lot of people that are really interested and running initiatives. So I want to address it in both sense. So let me start around those of you that are running initiatives around bringing people in. I think first you need to be clear on which side of the spectrum you play. So are you playing on the on advocacy and initiatives around the tech side, around challenging the system? Because by all means, we need you to be loud and clear. We need access more than anything. Or are you playing in the skill side? And I recently moved my organization from looking at digital strategy from tech and now really helping organizations build strategy around the workforce, and in an initiative that I call Leave No Man Behind. And coming from the private sector, and I'll be very specific with you, we've seen what is happening right now. And I'm going to pick on Standard Bank. I'm sorry, but I'll pick on Standard Bank to be specific. So Standard Bank saw the move to digital as really the present, not even the future. And what they did is they used their workforce to build their digital capability. And as soon as it was done, they effectively cut down branches, cut down departments, and retrenched everybody. Without putting parallel to this new digital strategy, running a program that recapacitates individuals to now do the non-tech ones, which allude to all the skills that we're talking about. Now, around future-proofing ourselves, and regardless of what you do, I really want to give you some of the ideas that we specifically are really looking at. And so for a moment, I'm completely moving away from the tech. What you and I are going to see in the coming years, we will see a beautiful convergence of 4IR tech and 4IR skills. Right now, they seem to be two different conversations. So we have to build the two aggressively. And this is why I was excited about, very excited about this conversation we're having here today. Those of you that are slightly older might know this. David Bowie, who's a singer, says, "The future belongs to those who see it coming." And so for me, it is in that context that we talk about human skills. Now, Michael started very beautifully around going back to the top 20 skills, talking about the 4 C's, which really hone in. Now, what we've got to figure out is how do we develop those competencies within ourselves and within the nation, specifically young people. And I like that Rapelang touched on that, because what is seen as soft skills, thank you, Michael, human skills, I'm going to use that from now on. I can tell you now, the world hasn't completely figured out how to train and develop those at all. So if you want to go get a degree right now and get into a classroom, I can tell you now, universities are way, way behind. So the education system is not going to give us. Training offering in corporates still doing those very weird training programs just to spend budget. So they're not going to give us. We have to create and look for very specific experiences that will develop us in problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, and so forth. And I want to just quickly share some ideas and really pass it back to you guys on how we're thinking about developing them. And I want to tell you, when you're thinking about developing these skills that were mentioned this morning, outside of a tech world, don't be shy. There's going to come a time where, because you are creative, it will converge with tech. Because you are problem solver, it will converge. So we have to go to the traditional places that we have available to us today to develop those skills. So on the human skills / soft skills, I really want to challenge us to go back to the notion of self-mastery, because we have to teach self-mastery in the homes, in the workplace, because that allows guys to have this growth mindset and to have a more resilience, adaptability, and resourcefulness. You know, that conversation seems to be gone now and is now being relegated to these weird mindfulness forums when it's a core business competency that is needed for managing, for working in teams, for being part of creative problem solving areas. You've got to know yourself. You've got to have mastered your emotions. And so my question is, in all these programs that we run, are we teaching our young people that? The next thing for me around soft skills, a practical way of implementing them for me, is what I call to be a social anthropologist, which is really around cultural awareness. Let me give you a practical example, and I always challenge young people about this. Corporates are really struggling with understanding their new customer, which is the millennial. And if we can help our young people become social anthropologists, know their community, their friends. So if I'm in that project, you know, as a company, we would look for a single voice that can give us insights on the millennials in there. Because I can tell you now, that skill of cultural awareness is going to become a package skill to help organizations be able to drive their products. So, I mean, people that understand millennials, understand the township economies, those are the voices that are going to be used to customize apps, to customize programs and packages. A very big skill that I think a lot of South Africans struggle with, again, around the human skills, is around communication, written and spoken language. And what's nice, it is no longer about the Queen's English anymore. It's around communicating with power and impact. You know, as companies are battling with engagement, as the government is battling with having an engaged society, they're going to look for people with skills that are able to capture the audience and really bring them in. Yeah, you know, very big, again, as a way of developing these future skills we were talking about this morning. Leadership is going to be key. You've probably seen it now, and we're going to see more of it. We are transitioning from an era of the single alpha male that runs this organization, that runs a Nespas, you know, all these big organizations. That era is going. I mean, if I ask you today, you know, who's the CEO of Uber? Who's the CEO of Netflix? Some of you might know because you know, but it's becoming blurry now. We're not looking for this alpha male anymore. It's going to be about power teams that bring different skills. So one of the big transitions we're going to see that is, again, speaking into the fourth industrial revolution skills is going to be transition of this macho, bravo, alpha CEO, male or exec that we see in organizations today. And we're going to look for power pack teams that are able to just fully deliver. Again, when we run our projects, are we empowering young people in leadership development? Very big, again, as a way of developing these 4 IR skills, the problem solving, the critical skills that you can look for today, and I think we must drive, is entrepreneurial skills. And as you can see, guys, I'm not saying things that are I'm not talking about something new and profound and in the future. No, we are seeing the re-emergence of engagement models and places that were always there that will help us prepare our workforce. What I love when it comes to skills development, we don't have to start again. We just need to bring these things back again. So entrepreneurship skills training is going to be fundamental, again, as a way of developing these skills. On the most basic levels, there are no jobs. We're seeing retrenchment. So we're going to have to create jobs. We're getting into gig economies that are going to sit on these tech platforms that we are advocating for them to come. So, for example, one of the things we do is we are challenging and supporting business hubs to not only be teaching in the support, to not only help guys, for example, write business proposals and all those things, but in those business hubs to be teaching the very skills that you and I are talking about. Because for these guys to be effective now, you're going to have to do that. And what about entrepreneurial skills that we're interested in? We're interested in the ability of matching a societal need and problem to a solution and bring that together. In essence, that's what entrepreneurship in the 21st century is about and should do. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like complex problem solving. That sounds like critical thinking. And so again, we have to drive these hubs to bring that. The biggest thing and really a way of just, putting together practically what you can start doing. One of the things that we recently got involved in that's beyond exciting is beginning to work with corporates on when they run the retrenchment programs and insisting, and we're doing this through one of the unions, and insisting that as part of the retrenchment process, that it must include a reskilling capacity building component. And we're saying reskilling for the future. Not just tech, but reskilling on human skills, because those people are going to now go to the gig economy. Most people being retrenched today are not going to go back to the traditional marketplace. Another thing we've been advocating for is trying to get into curriculum with government. That's a little bit more tricky because it's a ship that doesn't change much. And really private sector coming in and taking up certain pieces of the curriculum to teach in the creative ways. And then the last one that we do is, again, working with the business hubs to bring consulting services and training on these human and soft skills. So what am I saying? I'm saying the focus on developing and business and developing 4IR skills today. We know what they are. Michael mentioned them in the beginning. We have no traditional educational platform that has figured out how to train them. We're going to have to create those. So we're going to have to push for more team-based work, project-based work, experiential work, practical application work, mentorship and coaching programs. Companies and marketplace has to now over-index in those, because that's the only forum where you will learn complex problem solving, critical thinking, business skills, coordinating with others, and the rest, and so forth. And I think we have a great opportunity now to make that a real conversation and a real thing we do with, and in any project you do, I want to challenge you to do that. I hope that's helped a little bit. Back to you, Michael. While I'm waiting for Michael, I'll just comment on some of these. So KK is talking about the gig economy concept.
I think that's helped a great deal. What do people think? We got the chat there going on. Let's hear from everybody. I think that was...
While I'm waiting for Michael, I'll just comment on some of these. So KK is talking about the gig economy concept.
I think that's helped a great deal. What do people think? We got the...
That's great.
Okay, what's happening now? Beth, are you still there?
I'm still here, Michael.
Okay, so sorry, a little bit of kerfuffle there, but very, very useful apparently. And okay, what's happening now? Beth, are you still there? What's playing over here is very strange.
I'm still here, Michael.
Fantastic. You know what's happening, guys? I'm managing the background at the same time that I'm talking, and it's not a good idea. Don't do this at home. Please don't do it. So I'm playing a viewer's perspective at the same time as I'm talking, and there is apparently about a 7-second lag between reality and the screen, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So we're actually all in cyberspace having this discussion, and then it actually only lands on your lap 7 seconds later. But somehow, through the magic of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, it seems like we're in the present at the same time. It's really kind of exciting. So anyway, thank you very much. Carol, can you just give us your sound is off, I think. No?
I'm back. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
It's on, okay.
There we go.
Getting a lot of requests that they wanted to actually know your company name and your full name, which I did give your full name, but tell us about your company briefly, very quickly.
Sure. My name is Karabo Moloko, M-O-L-O-K-O, and the name of my company is Unleash Institute. So a strategy execution business that's really now helping organizations leave no man behind, basically.
Or woman, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Or gender fluid.
Leave no one behind.
There we go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Also, by the way, I did notice that you said you were never again going to use the term soft skills, and then you promptly did. So be careful.
Thank you for that. I'm all on human skills. I loved it, and I think a language has meaning, so it's imperative we start positioning it right. I love it.
Thank you for that, because we really also, you know, at Human Innovation Project, which after we get through the really important stuff, we're going to ask your indulgence to all hear about what we're up to, because we're really only officially launching today. And this event has been part of, you know, that effort to actually get people to know about us. So language is very important to us as well. And, you know, that term soft skills, it has been driving us crazy until we figured out it's very simple to just call it something else. So thanks for adopting it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So our leave no learner behind. That's a good one too. Leave no human behind.
Oh, I love those.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So we're going to now throw over to our partner in this entire event, IDM, led by Jonathan Mann. and he is going to take us through the key moment of the day, which is the concept of digital leapfrogging, which I think leads very nicely right from Karabo's talk. And by the way, did you know that in Russian, moloko means milk? So every time I hear Karabo's name, I think Russian, I think about milk. There's no point to that. But anyway, we're having a little bit of a podcast moment. Throwing over to you, John.
Thanks, Michael. Are you going to run the slides in the back end, so nobody has to look at my bespectacled face? Are you going to run the slides? Thank you. So everybody, if we could have the next one, please. So before I get into this, just to give you a very quick update, quick outline of IDM. IDM stands for the Institute for Developing Markets. And we're a learning institution that works across Africa. And we've been working for about 7 years across the region in 10 or 12 different countries. And the purpose behind IDM is to bridge the skills gap in the region. So as you know, and as we've all been discussing, technology is changing very quickly. The 4IR is coming, but there's also a population boom going on in Africa. But education, as we've been discussing, secondary and tertiary education is somewhat flatlining. And therefore that skills gap is opening up more and more every day. And so IDM has been established to help bridge that gap. We principally work with corporates across the region, but we also do outreach work into communities as well with our Future Leaders program and others. So I want to keep this this next session, it's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes perhaps. I want to keep it as practical as possible. And I want to challenge you all to think about what you should be doing differently in terms of upskilling for the 4IR, but also how you can coach and support and mentor others in how they think about their own upskilling as well. This next piece of work is based upon a piece of research we did last year called The Future of Learning in Africa. It produced a white paper, which if you're interested, I can share with you all. And the Future of Learning in Africa white paper was the basis for our conference in London last year, and also we had a small conference in South Africa at the end of last year as well. And the essence to the Future of Learning in Africa is, what is your foundation, and then how do you leapfrog? So the foundation was to do with EQ, as we've discussed, literacy and STEM, this core foundation that you need to grow and develop. For the purposes of the human skills and the 4IR, for the purposes of this conversation, we're thinking about literacy and STEM together. We're thinking about digital literacy in many ways. So we've spoken about EQ and the human skills and the 4IR, and we've also spoken about digital literacy. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions. I don't know, Michael, whether we can put polls up around some of these questions. It'd be really interesting to do that. I think I've sent you the slides, Michael, so you might be able to. Yeah, I've sent you some of the slides, so you might be able to cut and paste. Maybe not the longer questions, but some of the shorter questions into a poll. That would be fascinating. But this first slide is also referencing work done by the World Economic Forum, and that was referenced by some of our earlier speakers as well. It looks at the top 10 emerging roles globally and the declining roles globally, and you can see that they're extremely technical. So what I think this means is that the corporates that are putting up new job descriptions on particularly the really large recruitment platforms are specifying these sorts of skill sets in the jobs that they would like to, in the people that they would like to bring on, which I think is one of the reasons that's driving the South African government and other government to focus so strongly on these technical skills in the 4IR. But as Michael has been emphasizing, and as Rapalang and Karabo and others have discussed, it's the human skills in the 4IR which could really differentiate you in your career as you step into these opportunities. I want to move on to the next slide, if I may, Michael. This might be a little hard to see, so let me just talk you through it very quickly. It's describing the difference between how organizations typically encourage you to learn which is first box number 1 in the top right, versus how you and others do actually learn during the course of your working life. So as you can see on the left, if you look at the top bar on the left, you've got every day, then every week, then every month. It's a sort of an algorithmic scale. And if you look top right, you see the sorts of experiences that you typically associate with learning, particularly if you're in a corporate. Every now and then you'll be sent on a leadership program or management program for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days. If you're lucky, every 3 to 5 years, you might go on a business school program at Gibbs or UCT, or if you're lucky, to one of the overseas business schools. Every year or so, you might find that you receive coaching, or you attend conferences, or with your work team and your work colleagues, you might go out to facilitated events. And that's typically what large corporates focus on when they focus on learning. It tends to be very much the 10%. So those of you who are in the learning business understand that the 70% of on-the-job learning versus the 20% of the coaching, mentoring, peer-to-peer work, and then the 10% in classroom. The 10% is where you get least bang for your buck, and yet that is where most money is spent. And that's how corporates typically understand learning. But how do you actually learn? And how do your children, your peers, your students in school, how do they really learn? Most of it is not in the classroom. Most of it is in that bottom part of the slide that you see there. You know, day-to-day activities around reading news sites, or on-the-job experiences, or communicating with your peers. You know, every week you might look at a YouTube video. You might access some learning on a digital platform, where you might learn something new from Twitter. Every month or so, you may be joining a webinar such as this one. You may be reading articles you see on your LinkedIn feed. Or you may be experimenting with new ideas at work, or reading articles or interesting books. And then every quarter, you may be engaging with mentors, formally or informally, or you may be going on online courses. And then every year or so, thinking about, you know, how do I more formally edit certifications? How do I up-to-date selection maybe of external classes, etc. So there's a whole set of activities that you actually engage with, that we all actually engage in day to day, week to week, month to month, which really drives skills growth. And I think this is really important when we think about some of the points made by earlier speakers. Rapalang was speaking about how you curate just right experiences that are neither, you know, the classic 3 bears question, isn't it? It's neither too hot nor too cold. Your just right learning experience has to be, forgive me, I just had a glitch there. Your just right learning experience has to be neither too stretching nor too easy. Can I just check, Michael? Can you still hear me? I've just had a slight glitch. I just want to check. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just had a slight glitch. So I'm curious about how you as professional teachers, educators, can help your students or your peers or your children or yourselves curate just right learning experiences can accelerate your learning as the nature of the environment changes. Can we have the next slide, please, Michael? So how do you do digital leapfrog? And you know, the answer we're proposing is we have to learn how to learn faster. We have to learn how to adapt faster. And several of the speakers have spoken about our ability to adapt. I think it was something that Emma touched on. And we're suggesting 5 very simple steps, which you can play with, explore, build on, challenge in whatever way you find helpful for you. So the first is self-assessment. We have to maintain a very critical inquiry-based approach to our own skill sets. And this comes back to the challenge around EQ, which we've spoken about a number of times, because it's challenging to challenge ourselves. It's challenging to take a cold, hard look at ourselves because we don't like feeling uncomfortable. And perhaps the imperative here is having the courage, and again, using a word I think that Rahana and Karabo both well, either used or implied, having the personal courage to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And perhaps that's also a key point, also thinking about Rapalang's point about just right learning experiences. You have to stretch that boundary a little bit. You have to feel comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, and therefore develop the ability to take a critical look at where you are now, a clear view of your current skill set versus where you need to be. So thinking about how you self-assess is the first question. Then I think thinking about how you rapidly upskill. So once you understand where you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you would like to go, then the next step is to find the right learning options for you and how you curate them. And again, that was one of the key points that Rapalang was speaking about, how you curate and choreograph micro-learning in such a way that you can very rapidly upskill. Now, from my point of view, I think it's also critically important to get feedback on that learning and that skills growth. So reach out and test. So as you begin to develop new skills, new knowledge, and new capabilities, I think it's critically important you get feedback on that. So apply them in real time. And there was a number of the speakers, I think Kath has mentioned it, and from my notes, I also think Rahana mentioned it as well. How you apply skills in real time in order to learn in the moment. And there's nothing more powerful than that feedback. It drives your self-awareness and it drives the building of excellence around a new skill set. And I think the next stage, deploy. Once you feel some confidence around your capabilities, I think begin to apply them in your career, begin to test them, begin to work with them, begin to move forward. And then lastly, critically, I think pivot and keep learning. Who was it who said that there is a half-life to content? I think again, Rapalang. I think there's also possibly a half-life to some of the technical skills that you'll be learning as well. You know, once you've learned to code one language, 2 or 3 weeks later, you may find you're out of date as another language begins to take over. But there isn't a half-life to human skills. Once you have the depth of human skills, they can apply across the 4IR. But I think from a technical point of view, you have to continue to learn how to learn. You have to continue to pivot. You have to continue to critically self-inquire as to how fit for purpose your skill set is and continue to update it. So even though on that particular slide, there are 5 different bullets, in many regards, I should have put them as a circle. It should be an ongoing circular feedback loop. I hope that makes sense. Let me go on to the next slide. Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Michael. So as I said, start with a clear-eyed self-assessment. So here's a couple of questions. Now you can get these questions off. I mean, any internet Google search will give you any number of different questionnaires and self-assessments. Here's one I thought was quite interesting from the point of view of how do I self-diagnose my digital literacy. And Michael, I don't know if it would be possible to put that on a poll, but it would be great to hear from the audience around where they feel they are on this. So when you search for information, are you confident you're able to find the right information you need quickly and effectively, and that it is the right information? Do you know how to tell if the information is relevant and from a good source? Do you know how to make the best of online networking tools, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc.? And are you happy with the way in which you present yourself online and your digital identity? So when I was doing some research for this and I was looking at the future of work, some of the shifts in the human skills that come with virtual working that I saw research on included a shift in the human skills with how we collaborate. So one of those we take a lot for granted when we're working face to face because you can pick up a lot of information from body language, but that information is diminished when you're working in a virtual team. So you have to place greater emphasis perhaps on the clarity of communication and the clarity of maybe more structured facilitation in a conversation. How you share documents online and how you share knowledge online, how you manage productivity online. the teaming skills that you can develop online and the way in which instant communication happens in the virtual world. And I think, I can't remember which speaker it was, they spoke about project-based production online as well. So there's a range of sort of digital skills that are inherent in how your human capability is underpinned in the fourth industrial revolution, if that makes sense. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Michael? I don't want to go through all of these in detail. There's a long list of questions there. And again, this came from, this is one of the many self-assessments I saw for EQ Online. I've done a great deal of work with corporates, both in Europe and across Africa, for management and leadership development. And when you ask people to self-assess their personal skills as far as EQ is concerned, they all come out as more than, as above average. So there is an inherent bias, in my view, there's an inherent bias in our ability to self-assess as far as our own EQ is concerned. And perhaps that's just a natural human reaction. I don't know, you must let me know. But I offer these questions as an idea of, as a set of questions that you might use to self-assess and to think through your own EQ. But I think unless you have a clear-eyed view of your own human skills as they are today, then how you develop them is going to be a challenge. We have to have a clear understanding of where we're starting in order to give the basis and a solid foundation for moving forward. I think it was Kath that was emphasizing the importance of basics. Let's get the basics right. As far as digital leapfrog is concerned, one of the basics is fantastic EQ skills, fantastic human skills. But in order for you to develop them, clearly you need to understand where you're starting from. Next slide, please, Michael. So, a simple toolkit for digital leapfrog. Discard any sense of dependency. So, Rapalang and I had an exchange on the message feed earlier on. I'm curious about how you build personal accountability for learning. We're all accountable for our own learning. We have to seize and hold the initiative on it. And we have to discard any sense that we are dependent on anyone else or that it's somebody else's responsibility to support us and develop us. We have to grab our own sense of agency. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have to have very clear and very practical goals. That point about practical goals again goes back to Rapalang's presentation around just right experiences. We can't overreach ourselves. You know, nobody's going to sit here and go, you know, in the next week or so, I'm going to get a PhD on A, B, and C. No, let's break these down into modular, bite-sized, digestible, micro-learning packets that we can very rapidly assemble over the course of time. But nonetheless, a clear view, set clear and practical goals. The third thing is, and this has come through in a whole range of conversations so far this morning, is a mindset. A lot of the corporates that I've spoken to, and that I suspect Karabo has spoken to as well, engender cultures where you have a zero mistake mindset. And I think it's partly because corporate careers can be slightly zero sum, and our own careers have probably felt like that at times as well. If you make a mistake, then there's an immediate impact, immediate consequence on how we're promoted or the degree of credibility we have with our peers, or maybe even on our annual bonuses. So there's a fear to do with mistakes. But that is the absolute death knell for rapid learning. For rapid learning, we have to embrace failure. We have to embrace mistakes. We have to be empowered and given permission to experiment and inquire if we really want to accelerate our learning. So for those of you working in corporates, or for those of you working in schools, how you work with your peers to encourage that experimentation and failure, and almost I would argue a joy of experimentation and failure, and how you get away from those rather poisonous cultures in large corporate, which large corporates can have to do with zero failure, zero mistakes. We all have to be perfect. It's exhausting, and it slows down learning. Focused attention, and then take action. As I mentioned earlier on, this is rooted in self-awareness, which is a key cognitive skill, and will allow you to prioritize what you really need to focus on. And with the international, well, our economies and societies moving so quickly, in some regards, you can't waste too much time. You have to be clear about where you're going. You have to be clear about the micro learning you need to get there, and you have to focus your attention. The fifth point about perseverance, I think another vital human skill, and interestingly enough, from our research, a skill which is perhaps disproportionately important in Africa. A lot of the young professionals I've worked with around the region have resilience in spades. You know, you don't grow up in a township and put yourself through school without developing extraordinary personal resilience. And I have spoken to many people across the region, I'm sure you all have as well, of young individuals who have had to walk an hour to school, or in some cases 2 hours to school and back again, and have successfully completed school. You can't go through an experience like that without having deep wells of personal experience. So, deep wells of personal resilience. And so perhaps we might find that Africa has a disproportionate advantage in this space to other regions. We might, paradoxically, we might find that young Africans are disproportionately able to compete if they can access these deep capabilities they have in personal resilience. And then the last point here, connect and network. So learn from your opportunities and apply them and develop through networks. Share as much learning as you can, gain as much learning and feedback as you can, and deliberately curate your networks in order to support your learning. Many years ago, I was working with young professionals in London, and 9 times out of 10, I found they were not deliberate in how they assembled their own network. They tended to just network with people who are either in their immediate professions or with people they liked, not necessarily with the network they need in terms of supporting their career 2, 3, 5 years from now. So networking is a profoundly important human skill, and it is one that needs to be deliberately managed. So yeah, I think I've said enough on that. So Michael, I'm not sure if there's another slide or not. I'm conscious that I'm running out of time a little bit. Oh, okay. So I think this is the last one. This is the how. I think Kath and others said, let's keep practical, let's keep our feet on the ground. So if there's, I think this is the last slide, yes. So very practically, here's 3 or 4 ideas on how you can accelerate your learning from a point of view of digital leapfrog, how you can leapfrog the skills that you may feel you need to leapfrog into new opportunities and new skill sets. 1, be very clear about your learning objectives. Curate your content from existing resources. So be practical, start with what you've already got and then think about moving from there. Chunk your content down into bite-sized modular chunks, again, thinking about the just right learning experience. And then be creative, you know, just as that earlier slide said, think about all the diverse channels of content that you have access to, and mix it up, enjoy it. I think that's probably a good point to conclude on. Can I hand back to you, Michael?
Thank you, Jonathan. We are now going straight into a engagement around the last 2 talks around the issues of the questions of how do we, incorporate this kind of idea of digital leapfrogging and what Karabo was saying. First, let's have a look at the results of the poll. Apparently we've lost the second poll, but the result was overwhelmingly human skills. It was more than 2/3 said human skills. I don't know where the result has actually gone. We are going to have a panel now. Before we do, let's have a look at the result of the more complex poll that was asked, which was, how do you access digital literacy? And the overwhelming answer, more than 50%, was continuous learning, which doesn't seem like a super big surprise. And again, it does potentially apply to a simplification of the question of how do we actually, how do we deal with access questions? Again, micro-learning, easier to access, obviously less data requirements, less time requirements. So even before we get to the ability to filter out fake news or managing digital identity, those kind of things that are a little bit more sophisticated, seems that the majority of people have said continuous micro-learning. Now, don't want to overpopulate the screen with middle-aged white men, so I'm going to leave again. But if Emma and Beth could turn on their screens so we can see them, and Rapalong, don't you want to? There she is. Rapalong's coming, and John, good luck handling a panel of very wonderful. Well, you're not going to run the panel, but you're on the panel. So Beth is running the panel again. Yeah, you're only the one representing the gender. So good luck with that, and I hope that you do a better job than I would.
Thank you, Michael. Don't worry, John, you're safe. I want to, well, thanks so much, Karabo and Johnny, for your presentations now. Please, our participants, post your questions in the chat so that we can respond to them. You can also raise your hand so that we can bring you into the room as well. And you do that by requesting to the chat panel. Just started, Karabo, about leadership and the issue of leadership being one of the prohibitive factors that we are looking at in this transition to 4IR. What type of leadership do we need, do you think, in this time? What should we be looking for in that space? And the rest of the panel, feel free to add, but I'll ask Karabo to kick us off. Okay, Rapalang's joined us too. Great.
Absolutely. I think, what we've, just from pure, if I can borrow some terms that I don't like, but I think will make the point, certainly the 21st century version of the servant leadership. So this is leadership that is very inclusive, brings in diverse voices. I think what we've seen traditionally with this alpha CEO has been the only people that they bring in are their voices, people that sound like them. So we're needing someone that's not trying to get their way, but trying to find the answer, which is what the customer needs. And so they seek out different voices to bring in. And we need leaders that know how to create platforms. And when I say platforms, I'm talking, yes, from a tech, but I'm talking about an ecosystem that brings in a lot of resources that people can just pull in, whether resources within their organization or outside of organization. It's not about I'm building this empire, but I'm gonna create a space where I can collaborate with what seemed like competitors. Those are the ones that are gonna create more room to bring in more people and to grow the pie.
Beth, can I build on what Karabo has outlined? I completely agree with you, Karabo. Inclusive leaders, and we need to avoid these alpha CEOs with large egos. From my point of view, the touchstone for me is the 7 levels of leadership, the leadership maturity framework, which was reviewed by Harvard Business Review, I think 15, 20 years ago now, and I can share the link if helpful. But they speak about post-conventional leaders. And for me, this is all about human skills. This is about the personal courage and humility to leave your ego behind. Yeah. And these large, some of them are quite small, I'm sure, but the alpha CEOs that you refer to typically are driven to a greater or lesser degree by ego. And that is the death knell for learning. I think this is the death knell for curating really powerful human skills. I think the key to it is, as you say, inclusive leadership, absolutely vital, including huge diversity of ideas from hopefully as many backgrounds as possible. But I think the key to it is is giving permission for people to experiment and make mistakes. And that takes courage and it takes some imagination. And most leaders are somewhat protective of their status and their position. And as such, they tend to be very demanding and not tolerant of mistakes in their organization and by their people. And I think that's a disaster from a learning point of view, because it creates a culture of fear and anxiety. And for people to really learn, we have to get rid of fear and anxiety, because as we know as educators, that just pushes up our cortisol levels. In fact, we need high levels of oxytocin. You know, the more love hormone we have flowing through our bodies, the happier we feel, the more we learn. And so there's a sort of a polar axis here, I think, for leaders to get over. But I don't know how we grow those leaders necessarily in our organization. It was something we've all been struggling with, I think.
Maybe want to just add a point in terms of what the fourth industrial revolution means, is that there's a lot of systemic change that's needed. And so we also possibly need leaders are systems thinkers. We need systems leadership. And that implies exactly what you guys have been saying, that this is a leader who is able to come in and almost from behind and the back create a platform which can hold various different egos and big and small people and all kinds of things, and actually not need to be seen as the leader to get a whole range of complex connected. That's essentially what systems leadership is. And I think that is a key component of the type of thinking around leadership that we also need to start looking at. We can't use old models and old systems anymore, because the systems are shifting. In fact, the essence of the difference between 3IR and 4IR is not the technology, it's the blurring of the lines between the cyber and the physical, and the whole infrastructure and architecture of the economy and education and all these things is now changing as a reflection of what is needing. So even leadership, we have to rethink how we are leading. We've got to have this systems leadership approach from government down, from in schools, in small organizations across the board. I would put it to you as well.
Another thought there, Beth. I think I fully agree with what's been said around servant leadership. And one of the simple sort of thoughts or tricks I usually use to try and shift this culture stuff to servant leadership or collaborative leadership is that in those traditional environments where they are serving the alpha male, the staff and sort of the teams are incentivized to please their boss or that alpha male or the C-suite first, as opposed to pleasing the customer first. Yeah. So you can see those relationships where often companies, they'll say they think the customer is important, but they never speak to the customer, they don't sit with them, they don't get rapid feedback from the customer. And this is where then it creates a space for the alpha male to be the ultimate decider of something being good or bad. Because as soon as you have to serve the customer, you can't sit on your laurels and you can't sit on your ego, and you have to listen and be humble and adapt and change. And that's the big sort of shift I think these traditional organizations have to do. And the ones that are doing it are the ones that are growing.
I agree.
Right. All right, so just shift to a little bit a different question. It was just a thought as we've been listening to everybody, and it's not a criticism, but often what we tend to do is we react to the challenges we have, possibly before we have a strategy, before pulling back and really looking. I've often wondered in South Africa if we're not reacting to where we are and trying to, because we do have so many challenges, the immediate issues are enormous that we face. But have we actually sat back and thought, what is our vision for South Africa? Who are we and what is our edge? What do we bring to this in the global context as South Africans, as Africans? What do we have that the other part of the world do not have that's going to be our competitive edge in the 4IR economy? I think that it is our humanity and our ability to be human. We know that we have this growing young population, etc. Now, yes, we have challenges, but have we really envisaged what this could mean for us? Have we pulled back enough from the problem? So in other words, really looking at strategy based on what the vision is and not just reacting to the immediate problems. Just maybe some thoughts around that.
Beth, can I jump in first on
Sure.
this one? This is, I think you raised a great question. As I mentioned, as I was going through my slides, and I saw one or two comments supporting the point. Resilience may be one of the superpowers that young Africans can bring to the world stage for the reasons that I outlined. So as far as human skills is concerned, we may find that young people on our continent are just disproportionately tougher than young Europeans or Americans. And therefore, that may be an advantage. The other, which came through from our research, in terms of what may create a disproportionate advantage for South Africans, but I think all young Africans in general, is the ability to get stuff done on very few resources. And our attendee from Cape Town School, forgive me, I forget the name, mentioned just getting going on digital learning with very few resources. And the reality is that if you live in a resource-constrained environment, if you're operating in an African community or an African school or many African companies, then to get stuff done, you have to become resourceful. And I'm English, as you can hear, but I'm very aware that South Africans talk about this ethic of make a plan. We can make a plan, we can get stuff done. So I think resilience is one. And I think the other is just resourcefulness, just the ability to get stuff done. And I think a third thing from my point of view is cultural agility, cultural intelligence. There are, how many major cultures are there in South Africa? Is it 11 you guys have? And I remember once having a conversation with a young man in Lusaka. It was to do with security, actually. I said, look at the development of Lusaka. You guys have never had any civil wars. You've never had any internal security problems. He said, we have 72 language groups. Nobody can organize a war if you've got 72 language groups. But the point that I'm making a slightly spurious, trivial point, but with so many language groups and so many cultures jostling alongside each other, then cultural agility, your cultural intelligence might also be one of the superpowers that you can bring to play from a South African context. So for me, that human resilience, the human resourcefulness, and the cultural intelligence that you have at depth in your communities could be something that both South Africa and the region as a whole may find gives them an edge in the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know what the rest of the panel feel.
Can I just maybe just jump in just to add to what you've said and also what Beth's saying about leadership. I think one of the key things around leadership is adaptability, to be able to know that we're in a rapidly changing environment, and adaptability is critical, and in tandem with that is communication. So it's not just the one-way communication process, but it is about the duality around the world that we're living in. And then, John, just to lead on from what you're saying, and it couples with Beth, and that it's about contextualizing these very kind of broad macro concepts like Fourth Industrial Revolution, where there is a tendency to wrap Eurocentric global North paradigms into an African context without really understanding the nuances of where we live. And one of those things, and I clearly can't prove it, but I believe in it fundamentally, is that if we enable these environments that I'm talking about, sort of like the growing urban poor, in a way that we should, I believe that possibly the next digital disruption will come out of a township environment, producing a solution for a township environment, as opposed to constantly looking to Silicon Valley for the digital disruption, whether it be an Uber or whatever. And that is a kind of a segue into a fundamental belief, or not a fundamental belief, it's a reality, is that this adaptability in township environments means that people are, you use the word resilient, but the output of resilience is most extraordinary entrepreneurial spirit. So there is an abundance of extraordinary entrepreneurs living and breathing in these communities, but we tend to want entrepreneurs that are sitting in an innovation hub or within an environment, whether it be a Workshop 17 in Sandton or Cape Town, and that just came up because I was on an event, yes, that was meant to be on Workshop 17, so no comment about Workshop 17. And so it's about, let's be realistic about what our entrepreneurs are, as opposed to trying to fit them into a Eurocentric kind of framework, and how do we nurture those entrepreneurs who have the most amazing adaptability and resilience that potentially could create our next digital disruption, where we're not trying to kind of create new we are enabling new paradigms to unfold.
Absolutely. I think on a lighter note, I mean, as part of this vision, we can go back to what truly makes us South African, which is really our Ubuntu, the essence of just our humanity and our connectedness and our togetherness in the way we transition, in the way we bring everyone along, and in the kind of solutions we make. And then, of course, a fun one is we are very creative. You just need to go to South African Twitter to just know that there's this creativity that needs to be channeled. So in this vision, as part of the vision, in making truly uniquely South African solutions, Ubuntu and creativity have to be core.
I have a question, Beth. So I can't see any key questions coming on from the chat stream at the moment. But one of the questions I have in my mind in terms of inclusivity is the question of language. And it hasn't come up very much so far this morning, but it's been very prominent. It's been a very prominent question when we've looked at how we develop youngsters across the region. And I think it plays to the question of access, which many of us have spoken about this morning, as well as the question of participation. And I think, Rapalang, as well, you were talking about mindset earlier as well, and I think it has a huge impact upon mindset. When young Africans in South Africa or elsewhere are engaging through whatever digital channel it may be in English, or indeed in secondary or tertiary education in English, they may be engaging in their second and in some cases their third language. And I'm curious about what, if anything, we need to do about this question, how we promote access to both technical 4IR skills and potentially the human skills relevant to the 4IR as well, by thinking about how we, what language we should be communicating in. I think Emma, you mentioned that mindset which comes with working in a Europe. You didn't put it quite like this, but you inferred, I think, a mindset that comes with working in a European language or with European frameworks or methods that may come from the global north. If we really want to build access for the huge communities of youngsters that we have in our region, the tremendous, and really unleash them, Karabo, to use your language, then what do we do about language? What do we do with that challenge?
So just a stat, again, I stand to be corrected. It was a while ago since I read the paper, but to your point exactly, 70% of grade 4s of African-speaking environments cannot read for meaning. So that they're just so African-speaking languages, grade 4, 70% of those people cannot actually read for meaning, which is an alarming statistic. And so the question of language, I think, is absolutely critical. And that's when I spoke around the kind of the world of contents. The way Michael started off by saying, for me, the future is human, and it needs to be couched in three main things: content, context, and community. And content is all about how do you enable voices to be heard in their own language, made for them by them. And so for me, language is one of the most critical elements. And you talk about cultural agility. There is no cultural agility until you can actually have a sense of being able to communicate. And it's about communicating in the language that's familiar to you. So for me, language is one of the most critical building blocks you have to focus on in terms of any 4IR or education whether it be in digital skills or early childhood development. I mean, that is for me an absolute given, and I don't think we've put enough focus on it. And it is a massive issue that we need to deal with.
Maybe I can come in there. I 100% agree with Emma, but I think this is where we need to start saying, this is where technology can help us in Africa. There's a whole host of solutions and innovations using AI and technology around language now. So language no longer needs to be an issue, because we potentially can have a technology where I can be speaking to in English, and Raphael is hearing it in one language, and Emma's hearing it in another, and Parab is hearing it in another. And these are the types of discussions we need to be having around how is technology going to serve Africa and our needs in FYR. Because technology, for the sake of it, if technology is not enabling human progress in our context in Africa, and it's not relevant technology for us. We get to choose what technology should and shouldn't do for us. So I'm not convinced as Africa, as South Africa, we can compete in AI with China, for example. But we could possibly lead the world in language-based applications that solve a whole host of language issues. So I think when we talk about leapfrogging, we're not just talking about leapfrogging in the sense of leapfrog in the skills context, but how are we using technology to leapfrog some of these social issues that we have and provide solutions?
Karabo, Rapalang.
Comment on my side. I agree.
No, absolutely. I also agree. I think if we're going to look at FOIR, of course, the Chinas of the world and the Europes are a little bit ahead in terms of innovating, using this technology and preparing themselves. So if we're going to take a copy and paste approach, then by all means, we will widen the gap that excludes a large part of our population that will not be able to have a relationship with the solutions, yet alone from a pure language perspective, be able to participate. That's why we must innovate ourselves and come up with our solutions that speak our language. I mean, right from the most simplest sense, South African English is a language on its own, which, I mean, add that to the 11 plus 1, you know? And it's going to come back to looking for proudly South African solutions birthed here in our language for our problem, for our people. And you'll be surprised, the rest of the world will take those when we're done.
Right. I am getting a message from Michael that Janet has a question, but Janet, I'm not seeing your question on the chat section. Or Michael, perhaps you have the question that you want to just voice for us from your side?
Do not. Janet raised her hand to speak, but I can't get her into the room. So I'm just waiting for her to post the question. Unless we're gonna, unless we want to drop one other person. Fortunately, we're at our max. So we only have 5 minutes left. Emma, I'm going to drop to Emma. Say goodbye to Emma, and I'm going to bring in Janet.
Bye, Emma.
Emma's still so thank you very much for your great contribution today. Is Janet with us? Not yet. Panelists, during the time that we've got 5 minutes, we'll take Janet's question, and then I'm just going to ask each of you to just sort of give a wrap up on your thoughts around today and possibly way forward, or just anything that is top of mind for you in terms of our discussions this morning. So you can think about that for 30 seconds. Michael, do we have Janet on? Takes a little time to get into the room. Can I start with you, Rapalang, just to give us your sort of wrap-up thoughts for the morning?
Cool. Thanks, Beth. I think for me, we are often in agreement already in terms of the kind of human skills that we do believe are important and things. I think for me, it's that often if we ask anyone on this call to define what collaboration skills actually is, we will realize that we have different opinions and definitions of that. And I'm sort of really still pushing for a common clarity or language around these skills, because we all have a different perspective of it, even when we agree that they're important. And without really being able to define the pillars or components of these human or skills that we want, how do we develop for them? How do we measure that someone is really good at collaboration and things like that? In what context and the like? And if we can't measure for them and things, it means we don't know how to develop for them precisely. And it's only with that greater clarity of thought we're going to be able to systematically empower people to do this in our classrooms, in our companies, etc. And I think that's the sort of the next frontier of it. The same way we were able to unpack what maths is at different levels of expertise and competency, we need to do the same for these human skills if we're going to be able to expand their application.
Great, thank you. Karab?
Yeah, so if anything, this conversation is so timely in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. One thing you and I can definitely be sure of is that we're not going back to business as usual. When we come out of this crisis, companies are going to accelerate their digitization programs because a lot of business models have been compromised, as shown in this period. Therefore, we now need to escalate aggressively the skilling with 4IR skills of people within the workplace and those entering the economy. And that means challenging training programs at work to start focusing on the right skills. That means personally taking accountability of our learning and using a lot of this curated content, or something Jonathan spoke about, and really start running programs in the places that we can reach to skill specifically for these competencies.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Janet. Sorry, that does take a while. So just a couple of thoughts and tying a couple of things together. Going back to the competitive advantage question, I think there are a couple of other things that we have that are distinct advantages. I wanted to agree with Emma around entrepreneurship. But another huge advantage that we have is that in many respects, we don't have to unlearn a whole lot of things, because our relatively informal environment means that we don't have a lot of rules that constrain our thinking. And I think that that's extremely important. There's an amazing book that I read a couple of years ago called Reverse Innovation. And I actually thought that Jonathan might touch on this when he talks about leapfrogging. One of the extraordinary things that has happened across the world is the sort of opportunities that have been created or that have emerged for so-called third world countries to develop solutions for their own use, which are then able to be exported back into the so-called Western or first world. Because they are simpler, they are better, they are faster, whatever term you want to use, but they are unconstrained. And also because our market is so huge, we're able to, people are able to make a lot of money in that way. It also taps into the notion of us having something to offer that is novel. There's an artistry about our people that is absolutely extraordinary, and we come up with things that are just so new and different. And again, it's part of that not being constrained by the old ideas, not being constrained by the way things that have always been done. And then I want to cycle back into the question of leadership. For me, there's a fundamental problem with our paradigm that refers to the kind of leader-follower mentality. And my opinion is that in the 21st century, We have to be seeing leadership at every single level, leadership within every single person. There was a fabulous, very old, but still very relevant psychology model developed by a guy called Eric Berne. He talked about transactional analysis, and he talked about people showing up as parents, adults, or children. And we have to, I think, get into a mindset that says fundamentally everybody needs to show up as an adult. Stop waiting for this innocuous leader or leader group to make things happen. Everybody show up as a leader. And again, I think that that's a strength that we have as Africa. And the critical thing, however, is that we've got to get into a position where we are not, well, we shift our continental identity. We have, I think, for so long thought of ourselves as the kind of, for lack of a better phrase, but that's one we'll all be familiar with, the kind of black sheep of the world, where we are the people who have our hands out waiting for handouts, and think of ourselves as potential leaders in the global economy. And I think that that would be critical. So if we grow up as a continent, take on an adult position and start to lead, I think incredible things could happen.
Absolutely. Bring our strength. Jonathan, we have to wrap. Can I give you a last word?
Well, that's
as
very,
the white male.
that's very kind, but I'm not sure completely appropriate. I agree with everything. I'm very excited. For me, the next step should be that we run this session in several languages, and that we make it a practical session. Echoing many of the points that many of our speakers have spoken to this morning, we should run another webinar. We should find the right technology so we can do it in a couple of languages, and we should look at a practical session developing human skills. And by doing that through that channel, we'll also be advancing digital skills as well. And we should be focusing on how people learn how to learn, how they can adapt and digital leapfrog and accelerate their learning, their own, and curate and accelerate their own learning pathways. I'd be excited to run a next session on that using that format.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Karabo, and all the panelists. Much appreciated. Michael, I believe we will be moving in just a very quick presentation around Human Innovation Project. Am I right?
Right, Beth.
Michael,
I'm going to. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Beth, can you hear me? Fantastic.
can
So
hear you.
I'm going to launch this presentation. I'm going to launch the presentation. There it goes. And it is right at the end. So I'm going to rewind through everything so everybody gets to see the entire presentation backwards.
What's on?
This is actually critically important to learning. As people who work in the field of learning, it's very important that we see things twice. So we're showing the whole thing backwards. Okay, here we go.
All right. So I think I'm supposed to just very quickly go through this, and part of this is just also telling you how we're going to connect, go forward, and how we can even collaborate to take a few things forward. So the Human Innovation Project is, Mike, do we have the next slide?
Did you want to go back to the first slide, or do you want the second
No,
slide?
no, no. It's not
Beth?
showing up on the screen. Yep.
It's running.
Okay, I don't have it in front of me. There it comes. Okay, so this is what we're looking to do, which is to really create a platform to have these discussions about the human capacity innovation revolution, because we believe it really is the human skills that are going to set us apart in the era of 4IR and with what is coming, how economies and new business models and things are going to be done. Basically, what I've just said, that we have an opportunity now for humans to become human, creative, resilient, adaptive, brilliant. It's who we are as humans, but it has not necessarily been front and center in how corporate works, in how training and skilling is done, in how education runs. And this is where I think it is an African revolution as well, because Ubuntu and humanity is what we do and what we do well. The values of the Human Innovation Project, we're people-centric, so we believe in all people are incredible always, and we get to unpack the brilliance that is already there within people. Africa-centric, we really view and respond to the world through an African grid, so it's acknowledging the strengths we have in our own indigenous processes and understanding of creativity and design and innovation and collaboration and all these things, and building from there. Future-centric, so you hear that the future provides endless opportunities for us to shape it for the benefit of particular and humankind in general, and we view the future with optimism. Innovation-centric, we're social innovators. We seek to explore new ways of doing things that meet an immediate need, but at the same time influencing broader societal change and systems change. Inclusive and collaborative. Inclusivity and collaboration are the only ways to build a future that's secure for everyone. So we want to leverage the changes to make the circle bigger and create access. So that's essentially the pillars around which Human Innovation Project is built. As an organization, we provide different education and change management processes in the corporate environment for educators and learners and for youth specifically. We also are creating platforms for thought partnership, which is what we've done this morning. Various creative collaborations to develop human capacity, and then content creation as well. These are some of the training and content modules that we currently have that we are using in different contexts to work with various groups of people. I'm not going to go through the detail. I think you can see it on your screens. We are all essentially either creativity experts or human capacity development experts. We've got a really good group of people who are very experienced in working with human development in a variety of contexts. We come back to what Michael started us off with this morning, where these are really the 4 C's that are incorporated into a lot of the programs and the work that we run. Some of the conversation platforms we want to have monthly, we are partnership, is to expand these events that we've just done this morning, where we can create these platforms for having the conversation and the thought partnerships. These are some of the topics that have already been mooted and put forward, and we are hoping to have many of you on board for some of these going forward, and to have you your faces on the screen instead of ours in a lot of these conversations. And I'm sure there are many more topics that we can tackle as well besides these that are on the screen. We are looking to do quarterly Creativity Connect sessions. We call them Beyond Design Thinking Group Innovation Sprints, where we can really tackle a particular challenge, human capacity related challenge. For example, there's 2 examples there. And I actually wanted to propose, given some of our discussions this morning, there was quite a lot of people asking, we need to come up with solutions, what's the way forward, looking for practical interventions and things that we can do coming out of this session even, so that we're not just talking. And one of the suggestions is that our next session is, like, I think it's picking up with what John said, is that we have made an innovation where we are able to do it multilingually, we are able to break up into groups, but we're actually able to start thinking creatively about the challenges that we have, identify 1 or 2 of those challenges, and really start collectively coming up with ways forward. I'm not sure we could do it today in the forum to say way forward is X, Y, and Z. But we have a session dedicated to that, where we are able to sit and design it from scratch with all the brilliance that we have in a network like this, and start really have those conversations from a practical point of view to come up with actual implementable options and solutions. Right, so the HIP Alliance, and this is where we want to ask you, Michael has posted a LinkedIn link, which you'll see in the chat box. we want to invite you to join the Alliance. If you're a partner of a member of the Alliance, here is where we want you to get all the information to you of what is coming up, suggest other topics and events, to become part of some of the design sprint, to really participate in the things we have in mind. And then there's another part of it that we don't know what the HIP Alliance is going to look like. We want to put it out there and say, let's have a Human Innovation Project Alliance, let's get a platform and bring on board your ideas. It's a collaborative platform that we can share and come up with new things on. So in a way, we know what it could look like. We also have no idea what it could look like at the same time. So please go onto the link. Yeah.
Sorry, can I join in here?
You may, Michael.
Cool. I just wanted to mention that in case there's been a lot of conversation on the side here in the chat about where can we get in touch with these people, where can we access this information, how can we talk to you guys later, and so just if I could ask people to literally take 30 seconds or a minute to click on that link that Beth has told you about. It's on top of the screen. Can people see it? And just join on the LinkedIn group. It's a completely fresh group. Even Beth hasn't joined it yet. You'll see if you look. But the idea there is to, like Beth said, gather the ideas of how to move forward in all these various ways that we're going to move forward, and who wants to participate in the kind of work that's happening. Obviously, we're looking for ways to make the interaction be something that is beneficial to everybody. People are saying they can't see the link, but they can see it now. So it's on top of the screen, guys, right at the top of the chat box. I'm going to put it into the chat for people that don't see it on top, but there is, and I can actually watch. It's really exciting. I love the present world because we can actually watch people joining or not joining into the group, so I can see if people are excited or not. But I'm excited, Beth.
Yep, me too. And I think we also, on that link, in that space, you'll also be able to access some of the content that was done today, Michael. I believe everything was recorded, so you should be able to replay some of these speeches that we had this morning, etc. Perhaps just elaborate on that as well.
I'm literally approving the membership requests right now. That's why I was looking to the left. It's fantastic. I feel like we're in some kind of sports event now all of a sudden. So guys, yeah, we're getting close to the end of this event. Janet has just given some good information. If you are still keeping your poll results open, then you can't see the chat box. So then that might be why you're not seeing the link. The interesting thing about the poll that we did last, I don't know if it's still up. It is. It's still up. So if you see the results of the poll, what's interesting, do you see it, Beth? That the winner is courage. So while creativity, collaboration, communication all tied, nobody cares about their customers apparently. So we're going to have a separate webinar on customer, because customer is actually critically important, because like I was saying at the beginning, to me, everybody on this webinar is our customer, and you're my customer, even though you're my partner in HIP, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that nobody voted for it is a bit troubling, but courage won. And so Rihanna, your introduction of the idea of courage as an important C to connect with has taken the day.
Maybe Rihanna is our main speaker on the issue of courage at our next event.
Well, we'll have to ask Rihanna. Rihanna, you cool with that? KK says it all starts with courage. So we would like to ask sorry, go ahead, Beth.
No. I just wanted you to elaborate where people can access the content from this morning as well, Michael. Is it on the LinkedIn link?
No. So what will happen after this morning? What will happen after this morning is that we will let you know very, very swiftly within the next day which the best way to access the content is. We did try to share the white paper on this platform, and for some reason it's just stuck. It's not landing. So we'll send that to you as well, and the link to the replay. And then, hopefully you'll be able to share it as well with people that you know that might be interested in the content. But there's two more things we'd like to, can I bring these up, Beth? There's two more things we'd like to get done as part of our launch, because this is our launch. There's, soft launch, I suppose. And we need to wrap up. So there's two things I'd like to ask people to do quickly. One is the, where is it going? Oh, the next slide. So we don't need to do this as a survey unless, Nicole, do you want to, or I'll quickly do it as a poll. So basically, guys, these are two logo ideas. We don't even have a logo yet. That's how new we are as the Human Innovation Project. So basically, which logo, guys? And, it doesn't even mean that we'll necessarily go with the one that, the more percentage says. But what would really be great would be to hear from you on the chat box why one over the other, or why neither. So I'm going to say 1, 2, and neither. Just for fun, really, to see if we can get some feedback from the potential alliance. It's hard to make a logo, isn't it, Beth?
Yeah. Yes. If we just both opinionated, that's why.
Well, our other core partner won't even look at the logo anymore. It's Beth's husband. He's fed up. So anyway, if you guys can help us decide which ones of these to go with. The last thing I want to introduce to you is there's one thing that we are also doing coming up soon, which is some of you guys that know me know that I've been doing this innovation training for quite some time, over about 8 years in tertiary and so forth. I've done it in the public over the last year, and we are now, as Human Innovation Project, working on it together. So Beth, do you want to just say a couple words about what the new people involved in you and Freddie and everybody else are bringing into it?
Yes, so the way we learn is important, and often the way we teach is we stand in the front and do a whole lot of talking, but people's brains don't necessarily always work like that. So our perspective, we've got quite a different methodology on how we impart learning, and it's using a lot of arts-based techniques and sort of more right-brain approaches to learning and to engaging. So in our creativity training, our creative thinking training, it's very experiential, and we really make use of quite a lot of cognitive processes to have sort of whole brain approaches to the learning. I hope that makes sense, Michael. It's fun as well. And we really bring in a whole range of different learning styles and approaches. We also focus quite a lot on an indigenous model to learning and to human development called the Circle of Courage. So that's all integrated in how our creative thinking and creativity training specifically is done.
Thank you, Beth. So the next version of this training obviously will be online. As we know, everything is now online. And it will start in April, which is now is April. So it's in 2 weeks. We may move it back 1 week additionally because of some really exciting developments that would worth waiting. And also the really important thing, guys, is that the first session of this, we're going to open up to whoever wants to come, and it won't cost anything at all. So I've just put an offer out. All I'm asking you guys to do is, if you'd be interested to do this training at all, just click on the offer, and it will give you a link where you can just register yourself to say you're interested. We're not trying to sell you something now or get you to commit to anything, but just to say that you're interested. Are you guys seeing that on the screen? Can anybody just tell me if you're seeing that? Anybody at all?
What should we be seeing, Mike?
There should be an offer that's popped up on your screen that is giving you the link to go and register your interest into doing the workshop. If it is there on the side on the text box. So, so basically, it should not link to a YouTube video. That's very odd. But we will also be, sending the offer out to you in the same mail. We'll give the other information. So that would be fantastic if you guys could pop in for that. And basically, Beth, anything else you want to add about Human Innovation Project? There's one more thing I'm going to ask.
I want to just bring Jonathan in as well, because we've partnered today's Human Innovation Project with Jonathan from IDM. And Jonathan and also did incredible work in the human capacity development space. So Jonathan, I think maybe you want to just also add something here at the end. And then we just need to mention some mobile before we close, Mike, just a reminder.
Thank you, Beth. I'm not sure there's much more I can add. I think it's been a fantastic morning. As I mentioned at the outset, IDM's purpose is to help bridge the skills gap in Africa, and we work with companies, entrepreneurs, and individuals in that space. And I'm super keen to continue our collaboration with this community and to broaden it over time and to continue to run innovative events, hopefully in 2 or perhaps even 3 languages. Thanks, Beth.
Fantastic.
Okay, one last thing we wanted to mention is that next month, I'm struggling because KK Diaz is supposed to be raising his hand to come into the room quickly, but he's not raising his hand, so I don't know how to bring him in otherwise. But next month, KK Diaz is hosting a digital transformation summit online, and we are working with him specifically on the Friday of that summit. Oh, here he is. Specifically on the Friday of that summit, and that day is focusing on people, so it suits the Human Innovation Project's mission and goals. But I'm going to bring KK in to give you literally a 60-second bit of information about that. But that will be almost exactly a month from today. Today's Thursday, a month from today, but on Friday will be the People Day of that summit. It's right after the Freedom Day holidays. So KK is here. KK, would you like to turn on your camera and sound, give a 60-second about that event, and especially the Friday? Or not?
I don't see him.
He's here, but he's got to turn on his camera and sound, unfortunately.
KK?
KK.
Sorry, guys.
Here he is.
Yeah. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi, KK.
Where with you, buddy?
Can you see me?
Yep.
Cool. All
I
right.
got you. Yeah, go. Talk. Tell us. Tell us about
So
the event.
when I was connecting, I obviously blanked out a bit. So maybe can you just give me the cue again?
Sure, man. We're just looking to hear a 60-second bit about what the Digital Transformation Summit is about, and especially the People Day that we're working with you on.
Yeah, so thanks again for the opportunity. For a long time, I've been working in the space where I'm helping SMEs and medium to large businesses to transform. More than anything, it's to really implement the processes and the system that's going to help them to improve operational efficiency and to ensure they avoid disruption, whether it's COVID-19, load shedding, competition, globalization, whatever the case may be. And that's why in January, I published a book on digital transformation, which will be one of the few books that will be given to those who register and attend the seminar. The online summit is happening between the 27th of April to the 1st of May. It's been something we had planned from a few months ago. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to present it to all of you folks. More information will be sent out to everyone. But it's primarily to help business people understand the foundation of what digital transformation is, which is, funny enough, not so much about technology, but more about strategy and about culture and about how we collaborate more efficiently and do things in a lot smarter way so that we can, thrive even in challenging times like we're facing these days.
Thanks, sir. Thank you very much. Jonathan, I think we're done here. Tondo Daza, we were going to give a thank you to her for her publicity work and so forth, but I don't think she's here anymore or still here, so I can't bring her in to say anything. But thank you to Tondo for her publicity work. Anything else? Anybody else that anybody needs to thank, or shall we just?
Can we thank our team, Melo and Nicole? yeah, just thanks to the team that doesn't look in. Much appreciated. And then Michael, Songoba was not able to make it in, but I think we'll post a video post-event for those who want to access it, along with all the other content.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And
Thank
to
you
everyone who's still here or not still here, thanks a lot. And the one important thing I guess we need to say is thank you to IDM for making this platform available, because we met last time at the last event that IDM did, and it's really the event that started this whole process.
The start of many to come, Michael. I think you've both done a wonderful job facilitating. Thank you for all the coordinating effort during the morning. It was really, really professionally done. Thank you.
Thanks to all. And anything else?
We'll be in touch soon.
Cool.
Lunch.
There was the plan to have a networking session on Zoom afterwards. I think everybody's kind of tired though. So can I hear on anybody on chat want to still do that? If not, we'll just do it another time completely. But I think that'd be better. So on chat, anybody say if they really want to have that networking session right now? We can give 30 seconds.
I think everyone, lunch is calling.
Okay, and just to be clear, guys, Songoba is really not feeling well at all. We will be forwarding the video as part of the mail that you will receive. So you will be able to watch that as an extra special thing. Okay, thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.